Hey folks, this episode is brought to you by one of our favorite sponsors, Sunset Lake Seder. You can use the code LEFT is best for 20% off. These products more necessary now than ever. If you want to relax, go to sleep, not stay up till 2 in the morning on the phone with your friends about what is going on in the country. I could have used a few more Sunset Lake Seder gummies. But when I did go to sleep, I used Sunset Lake. You can buy their Keef, their Smalls.
Emma taking a cab back to the office at 2 a.m. to the commissary to restock.
Oh, I forgot. Maybe I might as well just sleep here. I can't say enough about their products. It's actually high quality sebede. They use regenerative farming practices. They treat their workers well. They're movement sponsors. They sponsored our live stream for the election, which included us raising money alongside them for Gaza and for Lebanon. Sunset Lake, you can feel good about being a customer for Sunset Lake, and also it's really high quality products. Use the code LEFTISBEST for 20% off at sunsetlakesebede.com. And now, time for the show.
Every day's casual Friday. That means Monday is casual Monday. Tuesday, casual Tuesday. Wednesday, casual hump day. Thursday, casual Thurs. That's what we call it. And Friday, casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, November 8th, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Mehdi Hasan of Zeteo joins us to break down this horrific week in news. Also on the program today, the Harris-Walz autopsy shows an overperformance in battleground states compared to national anti-democratic party swings. This is a much deeper problem than one campaign. Pennsylvania Democrats narrowly maintain their one-seat majority control of the state house, and the battle for the House of Representatives is still on. Democrats insist they have a path, but it's going to be tight no matter what. Trump selects longtime Florida Republican operative and corporate lobbyist Susan Wiles as his chief of staff for his populist campaign. Or administration, I was told. Corporate lobbyist. Although it is fun that Wiles is DeSantis' number one enemy because she turned on him, and that's a big part of, I think, why he tanked in the primary. We'll have plenty of time to get into that. Elise Stefanik, the Zionist smear merchant who took out all those college presidents, is said to be at the top of Trump's list for UN ambassador. The foreclosure, although if the House margins are that slim, that might be a little bit of wishful thinking for her to get out of a New York district, but we'll see. The foreclosure king Steve Mnuchin may be back in the administration. He says sanctions on Iran, tax cuts for the rich, and tariffs are at the top of Trump's priority list. Go figure. Trump's campaign and the private sector begin discussions about deporting millions of immigrants, including Dreamers. Republican congressmen tell the media that it's time for them to be more public with their anti-abortion beliefs, seeing this election as a validation. And totally not coincidentally, women report an increase in misogynistic hate speech on the internet in the wake of Trump's victory. I wouldn't know anything about that. After firing his defense minister Gallant, Netanyahu picks a hardline settler as Israel's U.S. ambassador, and Israel sets the stage for complete annexation and ethnic cleansing of northern Gaza. Lastly, World food prices rose in October to an 18-month high, the UN says. This is a big part of what we're dealing with here in this country as well. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's Casual Friday. Let's get right into it.
10-day week.
Yeah, I can't. I'm just... The weekend will be nice, although, you know, the grieving process or the autopsy that's done, it's helpful to understand. Because once we do understand this, we can find a path forward. As I mentioned, we're getting a little bit of a better picture of how this election shaped out and why Donald Trump won. As I said, the House is still up for grabs. The most likely outcome is probably a really slim majority for the Republicans, but the Democrats still insist that the results that are coming in late in states like California will be enough for them. We'll see. It's extremely difficult to ascertain right now. But the one silver lining that's emerging really is that's even being generous, but that Harris and Walz's campaign did do significantly better in the swing states than the national slippage for the top of the ticket. And that does mean that the aggressive campaigning in those states did help. The door knocking, the rallies, the swing towards Trump nationally was 6.7 points as of yesterday, although there's still like 8% of the total vote total to be tallied. But in those swing states, it was 3.1 points. So it means that the ground game and good campaigning, which again, Hillary didn't do, Harris and Walz blanketed the swing states, that it did work to an extent. But the problem is that even if you have a robust ground operation, you have to be able to deliver something when you're communicating that via that operation. And that's really what we're seeing is a rejection of this kind of politics and a rejection of Biden and to some extent Harris's record on inflation and the economy. Ground game helps when you have something more to offer. And
that's a worldwide trend, right? Like with one exception, Claudia Sheinbaum, which I'm sure we'll talk about in the future. There was a massive anti-incumbency thing because of this. The COVID economy and crisis. And I do agree that by certain metrics, American recovery was well handled. And part of that is just our power as a country in general. And
you see that Democrats, oddly, people were trolling a little with this take, but they overperformed some of those other incumbent parties. And that's shocking given how poorly they did. But the case study is Mexico. If Biden had a record and an approval rating like AMLO, Democrats would be in a very different situation with a female successor.
And like the amount of the type of affirmative agenda for social safety net that was promised there, I think.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, and maybe the story. And the biggest Trump swings is kind of what we predicted. Now that we're seeing it's in these blue states, New Jersey polling indicates New Jersey would have flipped red if Biden was still in the race. Like New Mexico could have flipped red if Biden was still in the race. Virginia. This was going to be a bloodbath, and this stopped the bleeding a little bit. So again, the idea that we couldn't defeat this guy is insane. But when you look at these headwinds, it makes a little bit more sense. And, this needs to be a complete reimagining of the Democratic Party and these politics, and we need to coalesce behind a New Deal style agenda for this country. But let's look at this analysis here. Yeah, let's wait for this. Okay. Can we just go to Dave Weigel's analysis of the swing states, just because I'm on this point right now? This is Dave's analysis of the results, because her losing the popular vote is really that function of this massive drop off in the more populous solid blue or red states too. But in the swing states, they did overperform at least where it counted. Weigel says still seeing Harris couldn't turn out millions of Biden voters, and the count in swing states says that's not true. In Wisconsin, Harris got 37,000 more votes than Biden, the most votes of any Democratic candidate since Obama in 2008. She lost because Trump added 77,000 more votes since 2020. Again, that is also extremely concerning and should make Democrats reevaluate their strategy, especially this like suburban orientation. Weigel says
Turns out there's more people that earn under 100,000 than make more than 100,000. I mean, who would have thought?
Yeah, and that is the unwinding of the Obama coalition, and it was easier to do because of austerity politics. So,
and it's a huge problem that the Democrats, even Biden, like I was still saying, like, look, poor people vote for Democrats to the extent that they vote, and in large part they are depressed. They're not as depressed,
Yeah.
but the extent they get to the polls, they vote Democrat. It's a huge problem that has changed.
right, yeah, exactly. And you were saying that, you were right about that. Here, Weigel says she's very close to Biden 2020 raw vote in Michigan and Pennsylvania. Had Trump just recreated his 2020 vote, he would have lost Michigan and Pennsylvania, would be too close to call still, but he added 151,000 votes in Michigan, 108,000 votes in Pennsylvania. In Georgia, Harris overperformed. He's pointing out there Biden. Trump added 200,000 votes. North Carolina, Harris outran Biden by 4,000 votes. Trump added 120,000 votes.
And do you think part of this might be like Trump's vote was depressed because of COVID in 2020?
That is right. And the Democrats didn't respond in an adequate way that met the moment. They allow, I blame Joe Manchin and Sinema a lot for this, but there was a pivot in 2022 in the Biden administration with the departure of Ron Klain and Jeff Zients being his chief of staff, who was from the corporate world, as opposed to Klain being in the political world. And all of these initiatives kind of dropped off in favor of let's bloat the military budget and send as much arms to Ukraine. Again, I support arming Ukraine, but like not at the expense of other options.
People better not be seeing their rent and health care prices and stuff go up.
Right. And then Israel, which exacerbated that problem as well. And then like I'm also seeing that, oh, she's going to lose 15 million more votes than Biden. The count in California and like Arizona is not over yet. So she's still going to lose the popular vote. But in the swing states, campaigning still worked. That's the one real silver lining here. And it just makes it so clear that her biggest mistake was not distancing herself more from Biden. And, you know, I don't know if she could have even done that as sitting VP, if that would have stretched credulity. That's just the facts of the situation. But she did remain loyal to Biden the entire time, pretty much. And it's interesting. How did the Biden team reward her? Well, this was yesterday. A reporter asked Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre about whether Biden showed arrogance staying in the race as a deeply unpopular 81-year-old incumbent who had heavily implied that he would be a bridge candidate for a new generation when he got into office. This was her response.
A lot of criticism in the last couple of days directly addressed at President Biden for some of the questions that have already been asked. Running in the first place or not stepping aside faster. Some of that criticism has also been directed at his team and the advisors around him for advising him to do what he did. Can you address that criticism?
To do what he did, meaning?
Running again, not stepping aside faster, and showing what some people say, quoting folks here, an arrogance of believing he was the only one who could beat Donald Trump.
I mean, you said something at the end that I do want to just kind of reiterate and remind folks, and it was a good reminder to me, which is like, look, this is the president who has been the only person has been able to beat Donald Trump. I mean, that is true. In 2020, he was able to do that. There were more than 20 candidates who tried to beat him, and he was the one that has been able to do that. I talked about what happened in the midterms, how it was historical for a new administration in more than 60 years to have been able to have that type of outcome from the 2022 midterms when everybody said it would be a red wave. What I will also say is that he's incredibly proud of the campaign that this vice president.
Oh, sure.
ran.
Okay, whatever. I don't need to hear
Incredibly
anymore.
so.
I don't need to hear anymore. It is. You did not. The Democrats
COVID beat 'em.
outperformed in 2022 because of Dobbs, despite you.
Yep.
Despite you. Like, there was reporting that Mike Donilon, one of his top advisors, thought that they overperformed in 2022 because Biden was more moderate on abortion, that he thought it was icky as a Catholic. What? What?
I mean, should we play Biden? I mean, I could find it Biden's abortion answer in the debate when he started talking about migrant killing somebody.
Yeah, Noah from Tampa writes in, he won the primary because of Jim effing Clyburn. That's exactly right. And Obama.
Exactly, and Barack Obama.
So they're gesturing towards the like crumbling institutions that propped Biden up in the primary to stymie Bernie's rise, and taking that as some sort of validation that he was a transformational candidate or figure. Ridiculous.
You beat a guy during a giant pandemic where he was talking about injecting bleach into their bodies.
And this is the thing is like why I'm not really gonna move on this whole point about the misogynoir and the misogyny here is like they're just letting the strategy is just like, okay, we decided we were going to pick a black woman to be VP for identitarian reasons. We selected Kamala Harris. We sidelined her the entire time. We made her the border czar because this was an unpopular issue for us. We didn't want her relatively youthful age to outshine Biden. And then she has to get to the front of this candidacy. And there were mistakes that were made. But because she wasn't able to make up for his extreme unpopularity, now it's like, oh, well, it was Biden. He was the only one who was able to defeat Donald Trump. Without COVID, this is just like honestly validation 4 years later as to what we were saying, because a lot of liberals, I was very skeptical that Biden could defeat Donald Trump prior to COVID. And a lot of liberals look back on that and they say, oh, how wrong progressives were.
We need to do
No.
the safe thing and pick Joe Biden.
No. If it wasn't COVID, if there wasn't COVID, there's I think a really good chance that Biden would have gotten reelected.
I remember feeling like we skated by at the time.
Yeah, we did. I mean, and the margins were extremely thin across those swing states, and it ended up biting them in the ass, obviously. And so, yeah, it's just like and the arrogance too of just them seeing that their strategy is validated in any way is really concerning to me. And luckily, these dinosaurs are going to be out of office and hopefully not be taken seriously in the Democratic Party. It seems to be that the consensus in Washington is that this was Biden's fault. But, Chuck Schumer, I saw Bhaskar Sankara had a short piece that was really good in The Guardian with the quote that I'd forgotten about Chuck Schumer saying, for every blue-collar Democrat we lose in Western Pennsylvania, we will pick up 2 moderate Republicans in the suburbs in Philadelphia, and you can repeat that in Ohio, Illinois, and Wisconsin. And I had thought that in 2022, it looked like, oh, maybe they can skate by on this strategy, and it seemed like they might have been able to do that, and I thought they could in 2024. They can't. It's a failure. This needs to be a complete reimagining of what Democrats offer people. A New Deal style, bold economic vision, a charismatic, populist, progressive, leftist leader emerging in the 2028 primary is the outcome on the presidential level that we need to engender. On the local level, we need to be building up resistance groups and leftist organizations to put forward our candidates. That is all work that we're going to begin doing in the aftermath of this. But to see that response after it was Biden's stubborn decision to, I'm staying in the race, stick around, even with those historic unfavorables and with his inability to communicate. He couldn't communicate. Even if the Democrats want to be like, it's the voters' fault for not seeing how good we were for them, it doesn't matter because Biden couldn't communicate it, and also it's not being felt down in people's pocketbooks.
Let's go.
So, learn something. And let's not throw Harrison Walls under the bus, who, in the end of the day, did the best they could with the set of circumstances.
The truth
that they
is,
had.
the only bright side of this is that like if they would have been able to win with the Cheney route, it would have meant like I don't know if there's a lot of room for like grassroots political action. This kind of resounding loss not only shows that there's room for it, there is a need for it, because these people cannot be trusted to say maintain the advances that have been won by previous rights movements even. And so we need to get involved. And I think these people are, if Trump can beat them with this shitty campaign, because I think this campaign was not a good campaign.
Awful.
I think it was beatable. I think that the Democrats are also beatable too. And you know, part of that is we need to lessen the influence of a little guy named Barack Obama, because
this is a reject. His enough with this Obama infrastructure nostalgia. Him and Michelle Obama campaigning for her all of October didn't make a difference. We build anew, and we build it in the style of a Bernie Sanders vision, the coalition that he built in 2016, that the Democrats broke apart. We begin to rebuild that starting today.
And also kind of the Jesse Jackson one. Like let's actually let one of these let's actually not strangle these in the crib every time that they start trying to redeem the Democratic Party into something, you know, this nation can actually be proud of.
Exactly. All right, folks, quick break, a word from our sponsors, and then we'll be talking to Mehdi Hasan of Zeteo.
Hey, folks, I have gotten more design sensitive as I have gotten older, and I know what I like. Sort of like mid-century modern, somewhere around there, but also like sort of Scandinavian. And I got a beautiful bed recently with sort of like a headboard with dowels. It's like a white oak. It really is nice looking. And I also got a beautiful brass lamp. I got my mattress too, all from Article. Article believes in delightful design for every home, and thanks to their online-only business model, they have some really delightful prices too. Like I say, they have mid-century modern, they have coastal, they have industrial, they have Scandi, boho designs. They make their furniture shopping super easy, beautiful stuff. Article's team of designers are all about finding the perfect balance between style, quality, and price. They're dedicated to thoughtful craftsmanship that stands the test of time and looks good doing it. And the thing that I really stood out for me, in addition to getting a beautiful bed, was Article offers fast, affordable shipping across the U.S. and Canada. They won't leave you waiting around. You pick the delivery time, and they'll send you updates every step of the way. This process was really incredibly seamless. Not easy to get deliveries where we live here. And I don't know that I've had a better delivery experience. Article's knowledgeable customer care team is there when you need them to make sure your experience, like I say, is smooth and stress-free. Article's offering you $50 off your first purchase of $100 or more. To claim, visit article.com/majority. The discount will be automatically applied at checkout. That's article.com/majority. $50 off your first purchase of $100 or more. Check it out. Hi, folks. If you're anything like me, you're a details person. You want to understand how things work. You read your nutritional information on the cereal boxes. Then maybe you look at the cereal box and go like, I'm not going to eat this. One time, maybe you even read the terms and conditions on an internet purchase. If you're like me, you've maybe done it way too many times. So when you're giving a charity, you should look at GiveWell. It's an independent resource for rigorous, transparent research about great giving opportunities whose website's going to leave even the most detail-oriented reader busy. GiveWell has now spent over 17 years researching charitable organizations and only directs funding for a few of the highest impact opportunities they found. Over 100,000 donors have used GiveWell to donate more than $2 billion. Rigorous evidence suggests these donations will save over 200,000 lives and improve the lives of millions more. I've been giving through GiveWell now for, I feel like maybe the last 5 or 6 years. I have found a bunch of charities through there. They change over the years. They have changed as to the ones that they recommend, but you can research other charities through the year there. It really is. Boston Globe called GiveWell the gold standard for giving. And what they do is they basically provides the opportunity for donors to make the most informed decisions about high impact giving. All of their research is laid out there for free. You can make tax deductible donations to their recommended funds or charities, and GiveWell does not take a cut. It's sort of amazing what they do. And what really always impresses me, they have an entire vertical on their website dedicated to what they've gotten wrong in the past. They're completely transparent about how they make their calculations, what they've done wrong over the past 10 years. It's sort of fascinating, frankly. But for example, the bed nets to prevent malaria, it costs $5 to provide one net. Nets can reduce the number of malaria infections, and enough nets and a large enough drop in infections can save a life in expectation. They also do cash incentives for routine childhood vaccines. It costs about $155 to vaccinate an infant. This funding provides cash transfers to incentivize caregivers to bring babies to clinics for routine childhood vaccinations. It prevents disease, reduces child mortality, and then gives cash in the hand of people who are living often in extreme poverty. And all the data shows that they know best how to expend those resources. Go to givewell.org to find out more. Make a donation, select podcast, and enter the Majority Report with Sam Seder at checkout. Make sure they know that you heard about them from us. Again, that's givewell.org to donate or find out more. Link will be in the podcast and YouTube description below. Emma?
We are back with friend of the show, Mehdi Hasan of Zeteo. Thanks so much for coming on and wrapping up this week in news. Did something
What a
happen?
week to do.
Yeah. I mean, I get, overall big picture thoughts, Mehdi. I haven't even begun to process what organizing for Palestine, for example, is going to look like under a Trump administration. But looks like they're floating Mike Pompeo again. They're bringing the gang back. Sanctions on Iran is going to be a top priority, says Steve Mnuchin. Great.
Netanyahu's just appointed a new ambassador to the US, who's a Kahanist who lives on a settlement, who's a total far-right annexationist, so sending a very clear signal, Netanyahu, as to what he wants Israeli government policy to be in Washington, D.C. Trump is going to return the favor and probably reappoint David Friedman, who was his ambassador to Israel first time round, who also has property in illegal settlements and is an annexationist, just published a book saying the West Bank should be part of Israel. So this was always the worry when people said to me online, I'm sure they said this to you too, Emma, but Mehdi, how can it get any worse? Well, A, things can always get worse, and B, the West Bank, right? Once they're done with Gaza, it was always going to be the West Bank was always their ultimate prize. So yes, things are going to get worse in the Middle East. Marco Rubio, Mike Pompeo, these are the kind of America First isolationists, yeah, right, who are being lined up to do foreign policy under Trump. He appointed Brian Hook to run his State Department transition team. Brian Hook is a long-standing neocon, served in the first administration, did the maximum pressure campaign against Iran, has long wanted a war with Iran. So, sorry, I hate to say I told you so. And normally I jokingly say I hate to tell you, told you so because I love saying I told you so. But actually I do hate to say I told you so because it's horrible. All of the things I was hoping would be wrong are actually happening, as some of us warned. And, on the Middle East, that's happening. On the domestic front, they're ramping up the plan for mass deportations. They're talking about denaturalizing American citizens. So good luck to all the Latino folks who said, well, I'm voting for Trump because he's only against illegals, not me. Well, actually, he can make you illegal. That's the powers they're taking for themselves.
Well, you had just mentioned in our break this piece that in the Statesman where the reporter here interviewed, I guess it was Rebecca Bellhouse, interviewed undocumented immigrants, but also just people working down in Texas, I believe. And these were some of the quotes here, if we could just pull this up. Several men, including Victor and Danilo, said scarcity of work and the growing competition can make the day laborers resentful of each other. Since Trump was first elected, the number of immigrant men who wait for work in the Home Depot parking lot has grown and diversified. What was mostly Mexican and Central American immigrants now includes Venezuelans, Haitians, and Cubans. It makes both men open to Trump's calls to reduce the number of crossings at the border. So this is a key point. They basically show that there's resentment in between like different groups here, but like that's part of the vacuum that the I don't know if we have the money quote. What was the big quote that you had mentioned? I'm on no sleep.
From that piece?
Yeah.
Oh, the quote is from an undocumented immigrant from Guatemala. Trump wants to deport those who do bad things. I haven't broken any laws. And I think what's so interesting about this story is it's kind of a microcosm of everything that happened at a national level with American citizens. But clearly the trends still apply even to undocumented immigrants who can't vote. So this belief that the economy will be better under Trump and that it's bad now, false. This idea that Trump is only going to deport criminals, false. The Trump people say it themselves, we're going to go after grandmothers, we're going to go after dreamers. Like they're very open about that. So you're just making up defenses for Trump that Trump is even offering. Oh, he's only going after the bad people. This idea that there is scarcity and the competition between groups. Look, there's always been divide and rule by white folks when it comes to brown and black folks. I'm from the United Kingdom. I'm from the United Kingdom because Britain went to India centuries ago and took over India by turning Muslims against Hindus against Sikhs. So divide and rule is not new. And I think playing off different ethnic groups against each other is something that's going to happen more and more in the coming months. I think liberals are going to fall into that trap because, we saw this swing from Latino voters to Trump. I saw reports, I hope they're false anecdotal reports, but I'm seeing people on social media claiming that some people are now going to call up the ICE on their neighbors, some white liberals, because they're so angry. Again, that's anecdotal. I hope it's not true, but
Jesus.
I do see there's going to be a lot of tensions between different communities. I see some black activists and folks on TikTok are saying we'll never support Palestine again because we blame those Muslims in Michigan for abandoning Harris. So there's a lot of internecine warfare there in the Democratic coalition, if it still exists as a coalition, which is all very worrying. But to come back to the undocumented immigrant point, why it's so interesting, that piece from the Austin American Statesman, is number one, it's the drawbridge mentality at its best, not just legal immigrants pulling up the bridge, pulling up the ladder on illegal immigrants or quote unquote undocumented immigrants, but even undocumented among themselves say, well, I'm here, but I don't want anyone else here. And it goes to the grain of this, oh, well, if you're a person of color and you vote for Trump, that proves Trump's not a racist. No, it doesn't. It just proves that all people can internalize bigotry, division, hate.
Yes, of course. Of course. I mean, we see how whiteness has evolved in American politics in just the past 150 years. And we're seeing similar shifts
Irish,
in this regard. And frankly, Trump was able to pit different immigrants against one another. And I would say that his focus on, oh, no, they're illegal, it makes it almost so like, oh, if you're here legally, and also if you're here legally, you can vote for me, by the way, you're more American. And it's almost like this reaffirmation of people's Americanism or their patriotism when that hasn't been the case just by dividing and conquering and pitting groups against one another. But the problem is that the Democrats ceded the entire issue of immigration to the right and had no positive message.
No positive message. It was Harris's only message on immigration was, well, I supported the bipartisan right-wing bill and you killed it. Right. It was a purely tactical argument. It wasn't about a vision for America, about how you bring people together. And I'm not saying immigration is an easy issue to win. Like the quote-unquote border crisis has permeated well beyond the headlines. It is a real issue. People do bring it up spontaneously, even in migrant communities. I get that. But the fact, and Harris was never going to transform the immigration debate in 100 days, let's be realistic. I get all those issues, but the reality is that when you've kind of ceded the ground, it's a huge problem. I also think the media, again, media failures. I know no one votes on policy, but the reality is Trump was allowed to sell his messages. It's about illegals when his actual message is not about illegals. Stephen Miller on day one is saying, we're going to expand our denaturalization commission. And one point I always make to people who fall into this right-wing trap of, playing one side against another, legal against legal, black against brown, Mexican against Muslim, is, you know what? The white supremacist doesn't care whether you're legal or illegal, doesn't care whether you're black or brown, doesn't care whether you're a Muslim, Arab, or a black Christian. They hate you. And, the example I give is El Paso. I know we've all memory hold all the hate crimes and violence and domestic terrorism from Trump term one. But if you go back to El Paso and the Walmart shooting, and I think, one of the biggest massacres of Latinos in modern American history, Pretty sure that shooter who went in there saying invasion, invasion, borrowing Trump and the GOP's rhetoric, didn't go in there and check with people whether they were legal or illegal before he shot them.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's the same thing with the cats and dogs rhetoric about Springfield. Those migrants were here legally under temporary protected status. But no, I think they're illegal. And at the end of the day,
Katie Vance said, he just declared them illegal through fiat.
All the mockery of that didn't matter. I mean, this is my most lib point of the day, but I do need to just put it out there in case there are women that are watching this. I've been having a lot of conversations with women of some friends of mine too, of different, backgrounds and different races, whatever. And the same through line is emerging, and they all voted for Harris, right? So it's not the full picture, but where do you go from here in the sense where she, despite all of her campaign failures, was clearly more competent, smarter, more empathetic, articulated herself, destroyed him in the debate. And he did nothing. He came out there, he swayed around to music, he made ridiculous statements. It's so reflective of how many women exist in our society, and the fact that he ran this explicitly misogynistic campaign that got rewarded, that was really the thing that stuck with me. And it's just like, I do think that we need to acknowledge that there is that element here, the misogynoir and the racism, and also 100%. The fact that she, whether it's true or conventional wisdom or not, on a national campaign, felt that she was very hamstrung from communicating issues in a way that might have made a difference because of this perception of her being too liberal. And we just have a really long way to go.
Emma, it's not even too liberal. As you say, it's just about being a black woman Democrat means you can't say certain things that a white Republican can. I mean, we all know that if she had spent 20 minutes talking about the vagina of a prominent American sportswoman, it would have been the end of her campaign. She would have been drawn down the race that night. Trump got away with it. He didn't just get away with it. People celebrated and thought it was funny. So that kind of double standard is just so brazen and so infuriating. You want to tear your hair out and just give up on life. I do think, look, we need to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. I've been slightly frustrated over the last few days where my kind of social media timeline, the people I'm surrounding myself with, are very divided on the liberal left. You've got the kind of, she ran a flawless campaign and it was all the fault of the American people, kind of one side. And then the other side is the Bernie, well, we abandoned the working class and we deserve what we got. I don't think either narrative is fully true. I think we need to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We need to accept the fact that there was an incumbency issue, right? You've seen the data, the FT put together the numbers going back 120 years. Never has there been a year in history over the last 120 years in which every government in the democratic world lost either power or lost seats and votes. And that happened this year, every government. And actually Harris did better than a lot of other incumbents. So that's one thing to bear in mind, that she was going against very real headwinds, post-pandemic, anti-incumbency, post-inflation, frustration that is global, not just American. So that's one point. But on the other point is Harris didn't run the best campaigns. It clearly was a flawed campaign. It wasn't flawless at all. She went on TV and said, I wouldn't do anything different to Biden. Insane. What a dumb thing to say. I think everyone can now agree on that. Even supporters of hers told me at the time she should have distinguished herself. She made a lot of mistakes campaigning with Cheney, all of that stuff that we can talk about. But again, I'm torn. So I say on the one hand this, on the one hand that, and then I jump around and I go, okay, but her campaign was not great. But then I come back to what you just said, which is, okay, her campaign wasn't great, but she wasn't talking about pets being eaten on a live debate stage. She wasn't swaying to music for 45 minutes, talking about Arnold Palmer's genitalia and saying migrants should be put in a UFC fighting league. Trump was, and he won. So
Trump was, and just to add, earlier this week, he was saying that I would want to see Mike Tyson in a ring with Kamala.
Yes.
Like, how do, and we have someone write in, all black women are tired of being reminded that you can do everything right and it's still not good enough. That's like, I think the depression, and there's all these material structural issues with the Democratic Party, but that is the thing that I keep returning to, is he was saying, I want her to get beaten up and then rewarded the next day.
And Liz Cheney being put in front of barrels, like he doesn't like women, we know that, and he wants to inflict violence on women. His own first wife accused him of inflicting violence and rape on her. So let me just get back to the point about the black women thing. Any black woman running for president in America, for any major job, faces implicit bias, right? The case about Harris was it was explicit. It wasn't like a Republican doing nudge wink. It was Trump saying she's lazy as hell. She's a stupid woman. She's low IQ, right? It was just brazen. And he gets away with it. She loses. And what's really frustrating is some on the left. This is why I'm going to criticize both sides. I'm going to do both sides, which I hate doing, but I'm going to do both. The liberals are going around saying, we're blaming the American people. We did nothing wrong. Some are. And some on the left are going around saying, well, you can't blame the American people. You have to blame the campaign. And I'm saying, what are you talking about? We can criticize the campaign, but also criticize the American people. I'm sorry, let's not infantilize the voters. As bad as as solid as the incumbency argument is, as bad as the inflation in 2022 was, as limited as the Democrats' economic populist appeal was, I can take on board all of that. That doesn't forgive anyone voting for Trump. I'm not going to forgive anyone voting for Trump. Sorry. That requires agency. You chose. You could have sat at home. You could have voted Stein. You could have expressed your displeasure in multiple ways. You chose to embrace the convicted criminal found liable for sexual abuse, twice impeached, insurrection guy who finished his campaign with open racism and misogyny, who has no plan for the economy. Please don't come and talk to me about inflation when he's about to jack up prices with tariffs. This is the most insane argument I've ever heard. People voted because of inflation. I get it. They were upset about inflation. But they actively chose to put in a person who is going to drive up prices. So I do think we need to have a conversation about the American public, the misinformation diet. Just reading a piece on Salon about like how many people were living in bubbles. You've seen the Ipsos Mori polling from a few weeks ago that's all over social media, which shows that voters who thought crime was up and border crossings were up and inflation was up, they were more likely to vote for Republicans. And those who believed it was down, which is the factual truth, that crime is down, border crossings are down, inflation is down, were more likely to vote Democrat. We have to have that conversation. I know Democrats don't want to look like they're being elitist or lecturing the voters, but there is a big swath of American voters who no longer follow facts and figures, no longer read newspapers, don't care about facts and figures, get their news from Facebook or their Republican uncle. That's a problem. We need to be honest about that.
And we've been raising the alarm about the kind of manosphere influencer space on this program for quite a while, and it was reflected in the numbers with 18 to 29-year-old men. TV president in a TV country makes everybody laugh. He's so funny and memeable and silly, and he does a dumb dance. 100%. And like, I mean, I don't understand. Like, that is really at a certain level. How else can you explain it?
No,
how else can you explain it?
The silver lining, though, Emma, is Trump is sui generis. So can Republicans replicate this over the long term? Not necessarily. Certainly not J.D. Vance, who's got the charisma of a chair.
Totally right.
So and certainly not his kids, who are all dumb as shit. So I think the real issue is, we're going to have to try and survive this guy for 4 years. But in terms of a long-term GOP strategy, I don't think anyone else can get away with what Trump gets away with. I don't think Ted Cruz or Tom Cotton or anyone else can get away with what I think Don Calloway, the Democratic Party strategist, was on my show on Zeteo earlier this week. And he made a good point. He said, look, Trump won this election 15, 20 years ago when he did The Apprentice. That's when he won this election, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's 100% true, right? His persona is still, even today, for low information voters, it's, all right, well, it's Trump, the guy I know from TV and memes. It's the business guy. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, and he is overperforming MAGA Republicans down the back. Like, so, they're going to do it again, the Republicans. This is a mandate for our politics. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's a structural issue with the Democratic Party that has broken apart its coalition by trying to appeal to suburbanites. There's also massive issues of misogyny and racism and purchasing power for people. Then it's not going as far as it used to. There's economic pain. We haven't had a real robust social program fully socialized since Medicare that has helped people in any real material way in this country. And that's the toxic stew and the incumbency thing.
And let me just be difficult and throw in some kind of caveats. I don't know if you saw the excellent reporting about the child tax credit, which helped bring down poverty by half, right? It expires at the end of 2021. Joe Manchin refuses to extend it. Every Republican, including Romney, refuses to extend it. What's interesting is the White House had assumed there would be a public backlash and that people would be kind of standing outside their members of Congress offices like they did for the ACA. And they didn't. And the polling showed that a lot of voters, while they benefited from the child tax credit, thought it was too liberal and it needed more work requirements. And I think we have to deal with the fact that Americans, it's not that easy, as Bernie puts it, that you just offer a bunch of lefty policies, which are good for the economy and morally right to do. but they don't necessarily translate into electoral, especially when you racially code them. For a lot of poor white people, they see quote unquote welfare queens, right? They see the Democrats offering goodies, which they benefit from, but they also don't want their black or Hispanic neighbor to benefit from it, or they think they're over benefiting. These are the conversations we have to have, because that's the reality. You can put out all the social programs you want, but in a country still plagued by racism and racial divides, that's always going to, influence them. And by the way, come back to the ignorance point, you mentioned abortion. I saw so many young women, not one, multiple, on social media saying stuff like, well, abortion, Dobbs didn't happen under Trump, it happened under Biden.
I know.
Like, when do we start doing civic education? When do we explain to people how the American political system even works? The average American does not understand the separation of powers, does not understand the Supreme Court, right? Our schools have failed us miserably.
Yeah, I mean, I saw someone have a point where we've defunded education to the point where our schools are colorful prisons, and then we wonder about like civic education for people. But the Medicare drug prices that Biden did a good job of negotiating, do you know when they're going to take effect?
Yeah, Trump's going to take 26. Trump's going to get advantage. That was a ridiculous move to wait. What was it? 8 years, 6 years, whatever, for it to kick in. All these things that.
He thought he'd win re-election because he's the most arrogant politician I've ever seen. Yeah.
The Republicans get it right. I mean, they get it. Remember Trump putting his name on the checks? They delayed. They literally hurt people in America by delaying sending the checks out. We know that now from one of the recent many books that came out. Was it Woodward? One of the books pointed out that reporting showed that the Treasury folks had to sit and have a whole internal discussion. Actually, I think it was FOIA emails that came out where they actually were struggling. They were like, we need to get these checks out, but we don't know how to put Trump's name on it. And they had to delay the entire process to put his name on it. The guy understood the importance of putting his name on it ahead of an election, right? Democrats have never understood that idea of kind of coming up with good policy, but also communicating the good policy, owning the good policy, chest beating about it. My good friend Chris Hayes, former colleague, often makes the point that Republicans will take the smallest of win and make it into the biggest of wins, right? Whereas Democrats had this great economy in many ways, not 100% great, but in terms of the metrics that people measure, unemployment, growth, etc. And they didn't chest beat in the same way. The modesty, fake modesty and all that crap. You watch, and I've tweeted this, and I'm sure you've said something similar. January 20th, January 21st, whenever it is, Trump will be bragging about how strong the economy is.
Oh, absolutely. And at the end of the day, the traditional metrics, I think, are capitalistic, and they're more about the marketplace and elite people who already have a lot of shares or whatever, who are judging this kind of thing.
Unemployment's one we all care about, right? Labor force participation is at its highest in living memory. Unemployment's at 4%. That's a good thing, and we should celebrate that.
Absolutely.
And he did that. And remember, normally when you break inflation, you do it through higher unemployment, right? That was what Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, who's now refusing to resign under Trump, hilariously, Biden should have got rid of him. He was a Trump appointee. But he had made that point. He goes, well, if we have to have higher joblessness, that's what we have to do to bring down prices. What the Biden administration miraculously did was to bring down prices without giving us a recession. And by the way, when people say, stop blaming the American voters, vibe session, etc., 6 in 10 Americans in the summer of this year said they believed we were in a recession. I don't know how journalism and democracy copes with that.
I don't know either, but I do know that the Democrats can't pursue this path, even though Biden did improve domestically on Obama's neoliberal austerity agenda. The antitrust stuff was phenomenal. Yeah, we'll see how like the child tax credit. JD Vance talks a big game about Lena Khan. Guarantee you, she's not going to be sticking around, of course. But the Democrats have, I think. It's difficult for them to pair that message where there were some good things on the economy, and I know you have to run, so this will be my final question for you. They do good things on the economy, but then they target suburban voters and Republicans, and they don't. Those are the people that already are on board with the message about the economy being good, because the economy is good for them, right? If you're making over $100,000, that makes sense.
They don't think it is either, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is, I guess. I don't know. The fact that Trump ran... Yeah.
I was going to say, I think the fact that some of the policies are still doing well in ballot initiatives in Missouri and Montana and all these places, Wisconsin, that's good, right? It's crazy that people in Missouri turned up and said, we're going to protect abortion rights and we're going to raise the minimum wage. We're also going to vote for Josh Hawley and Donald Trump. That to me is crazy. It reminds me of the Winston Churchill apocryphal quote where he said the best argument against democracy is 5 minutes in conversation with a voter. But it is crazy to me, but it also reminds me that policy-wise, we know this, the Washington Post did this before the election. When you roll out Democratic Party policies without saying they're Democratic Party policies, everyone supports them. Trump voters prefer them to Trump policies, right? So let's not get into the whole policy game. The policies are one. The issue is, who's the right messenger? The issue is, how populist are you willing to be? The issue is, how do you deal with a media environment in which the right have basically, turned us into a reality-free universe? These are some of the issues that Democrats have to really think about going forward. And look, is it depressing that another woman was defeated in the United States to every other country in the, not just Western world, but democratic world? India, Pakistan, Bangladesh have all had women leaders, but the United States, for some reason, can't bring itself to elect a woman leader. Not just can't bring itself to elect a woman leader, but both women lost to a brazen misogynist. That is a fundamental problem for American society. And one last point I'd make is, we're not talking enough about American society. I'm less worried about the laws Trump passes, and I'm much more worried about the kind of country and society he turns us into and what he does to our social fabric. He's a man who has one singular skill. He brings out the worst in people. And sadly, I think that's what we're going to see in the coming months.
I think you're right. Mehdi Hasan, Zeteo, please support their work over there. Phenomenal work on the issues of the day, but also Palestine and foreign policy. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. All right, folks. With that, that was pretty cathartic for me. So I appreciate Mehdi taking the time to talk that through. There's a lot to unpack here, and there's a lot that there's a lot of people we can blame. We know what the path forward, though, is. It is a bold economic agenda for the Democratic Party that is a fundamental shift from the way that they've operated politically over the past, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. If we can't beat a guy that doesn't even campaign and just relies on being TV guy, then I don't know if there's a bigger indictment of the way that the Democrats have decided to proceed. And we should be able, even with all of the pessimism, and I share it with Mehdi, we still should be able to combat this. And the reason we aren't able to is because the Democratic Party made an active choice to stamp out these politics as it related to Bernie Sanders.
Numerous times, because also Jesse Jackson. This is a repeated... I'd feel much more pessimistic about the state of this country if mobilizations hadn't been repeatedly cut down at the knees by Sister Soldier moments from Bill Clinton and the Bernie Sanders stuff. People are ready to do the job here. People are ready to get excited. Look at the donation maps for Bernie Sanders.
Oh yes, I saw that recirculating,
and you know what? They thought we can win without that, and it for a while it looked like maybe they're right about that, and we have to figure out where we fit here. They can't. They can't win without that. They can't win with Mark Cuban's opportunity economy and appealing to people who make $100,000. And I'm sorry, it is a absolute emergency that they are losing with people who make less money.
It is.
Like that is that could lot. We talk about like the Whig Party. Like and all this theorizing, like I think people are too precious about like, should I if I get into politics, should I be as a Dem, should I be as a socialist? You need to get experience, and then with that experience you can make an even better decision after that. The Democratic Party might die if they can figure out how to pass this kind of sauce to a JD Vance or something like that. Like we are looking down and also if Trump dies at the right time, JD Vance could be president for more than 8 years.
I know.
This party, this lost. Like, and we can kind of almost appreciate it. If they would have picked Shapiro, it would have been a complete full slate of the worst type of politics that I don't think can win. And if they would have won with it, that would have been one thing. They I think outperformed Hillary 2016, so there's something.
And they made up, like Harris was -4 at the end on the economy, and Biden was like minus double digits many times over. So they made up ground, but it wasn't enough.
And that's the thing is like I actually don't think it's mystifying why people think there's a recession. All respect to Mehdi. Like look at rent prices. If you look at like trying to rent a new apartment, and this is not just New York City based. This is Montana. This is everywhere. I mean, where are the places where it's easy to find new housing? Or where, like, literally people are going unhoused at greater rates.
Well, housing and groceries, too, which is a result of
what are your biggest expenses?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's true. And I think what's what was encouraging about the Biden administration is that they did, in the end, accept that this was greedflation, not a leftist conspiracy theory.
It just took too long to get there.
They just took way too long. And they also weren't able to communicate it in any way because Biden's a fossil. And also, there's an institutional desire to not emphasize those kinds of things and win on things like, abortion's very material to half the country, but it's also not the economy, right?
But it also
and
needs to be treated as a material, publicly
healthcare,
safe,
not freedom.
provided, and not just a right to privacy.
Right.
And I I don't like saying this because these are just reservations I've had about that thing, but like I hope it can work. And we saw okay, people turned out in 2022, right? Like, so maybe the right to privacy angle will be enough juice.
But it's not. But it has to be paired with a healthcare agenda because that's a real message. That's a robust message, And for much as I'm defensive again of of Harris's position because I think she faced a lot of misogyny in an uphill battle. You just saw that even if she's more likable than Hillary, it doesn't matter who the figureheads are. Walz' politics were the kind of thing where I was like, oh, this is great. This is great. It's going to get embraced.
Walz lost his home county.
But But without these individual politicians, yeah, okay, they're better than Harris is a standard Democrat. Walz is better than standard Democrat, but that's not enough to win in this moment. So
there's a reason, and people's memories it's like we just go back to pre-COVID. There's a reason 2016 happened. There's a reason the Bernie and then the Trump movement. That was responding to a real problem.
It was.
And a little bit of, and I respect all of the people who are saying, actually wages went up for the lowest income people the most. Well, those people got absolutely screwed the most. Those people died in the greatest numbers during COVID. So I'm glad they got a little bit of wage growth for a little bit. And I'm glad that might even slightly outpace the rate of inflation. They're still looking at, with those new wages, a world where apartments cost what they do. And so it's a treadmill.
Yep. With that, we've been kind of we left Wednesday's show off with a message of hope. No, we didn't, maybe. We at least did so Monday. Yesterday we played AOC's retrospective of what she feels went down in this election. But I saw this on Twitter. Ettinger Mentum, his girlfriend, Rue McGuire, reposted this. And honestly, it was so moving to me. This is a message from a French TikToker here named Santa Solina. And she basically wrote a letter to other French leftists when they anticipated that Marine Le Pen's party was going to win, and she kept that note and decided to translate it for Americans as it relates to this moment for Trump. And a lot of this was very comforting for me and a good vision for the path forward. We could learn a thing or two from French leftist resistance and organizing. So I leave you all on Friday in the free half of the show with this message.
Hi Americans, a few months ago in France, we thought we were going to have fascism, and so I wrote this text for my friends, and because you're my friends too, I found it again and I translated it, and I think it might be good for you to hear it. Okay, maybe I'm gonna put up some images of my cat so that you can listen. Hi, I'm not going to sleep yet, because you and I, lefties, we have to talk for a second. You're gonna make it through. Your fear is legitimate, and I share it. I often write in my journal how scared of fascism I am. But we're going to make it. I am with you, and you are with me. And have you seen all the other people that are with us? Even with the far right in power, even if we plunge in the sewer head first, we have resources. We are capable. We are not alone. We have lots of capabilities and lots of allies. So yeah, things are going to get worse before they're going to get better. but they really will get better. The old world is dying and desperately claws at us, and that's why it hurts. But things are changing. This is the ultimate shot at us. This politic of burnt ground, to be ready to sabotage yourself as long as the other suffer. Those in power and with privilege want to keep it so bad that they are using terror to discourage us and make us give up on our fights. But we are going to make it through. Generations before us did, and so we will. This is our story, the story of the oppressor and of the oppressed. A story where my identity as a white woman is on both sides. This is nothing new, and it's deceiving, it's heartbreaking, but we're used to it. We already know how to make our way around. We've been used already to not trusting the government. The next years are going to be exhausting and very, very scary. Well, there will be disastrous consequences that I do not undermine. However, I'm deeply convinced that heads like yours will find individual solutions as well as collective ones. Because you have a lot of capabilities. Trump is a booger next to what you've been through personally, next to what you've survived already. My dearest cockroaches, you will survive. This is not what is going to stop you. Believe me.
I liked that. And it was one of the few things that made me feel like, okay, we've got this over the past few days. We will resist, we will rebuild, we will persist, we will move forward. And we will learn and borrow from other movements across the globe and the global left. And we will begin to try to reimagine politics in this country as a broad-based social, economic agenda that is intersectional and that is inclusive, and that we will build, hopefully, that source of power going forward. So very much appreciative of that TikToker whose name is Santa Selena in France. With that said, we will wrap up the first part of this program and head into the fun half, where we'll take your calls and read your IMs. The number is 646-257-3920. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning had Steven Semler and Branko Marcetic on to talk about some of the submerged, but apparently, I guess, sort of iceberg-like issues that have been going on at the lower end of this economy. And also, I played a speech I've been going on and on about that Barack Obama gave in 2009, where he said, look, we got to give money to the banks, and I understand a lot of you would like a bailout too, but bankers are going to do better stuff with it. And I think that, as much as anything, is why the Democrats are where they are and why working people don't fuck with them unless there's, I guess, a global pandemic going on. And that was in the post-game, patreon.com/Left Reckoning, but we also clipped it over on YouTube already. So if you want to see us talk about that, go subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we're actually growing a little bit now.
Awesome. And then on ESPN yesterday, Bradley and I gave our picks for NFL Week 10. We'll be back with like a show that isn't so depressing on our next week for ESPN, youtube.com/ESPN show. Okay, we will see you in the fun half.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the majority report.
Wait, look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please.
No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. So I was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, Sushi and poker with the boys. Was offered a tour. Sushi and poker with the boys. What? Tour. Sushi and poker.
Tim's upset.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys. Was offered a tour. Sushi and
That's what we call it in the biz.
tour. Sushi and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour. Sushi and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Look at how sad he's become now. We shouldn't even talk about it because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour.
Wow.
Sushi.
I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind.
Was offered a tour. Sushi and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I had this debate 7,000 times. A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but like I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, all right.
It's not a fun job.
Tour.
That's a real thing. That's got real thing. Real thing.
Willy Wonka tour.
That's a real thing. That's got real thing. Real thing.
What's that offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's got real thing. Real thing. That's
The tour.
a real thing. That's got real thing. Real thing.
What's that offered a tour?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered a tour.
That's a real thing. That's got
Poker with the boys.
I think he might be blowing it out of proportion. Real thing. That's got
Poker with the boys. That offered a tour.
That's a real thing. That's got
Poker.
Let's go, Joey.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys.
Take it easy, Glenn.
Tour. Sushi and poker.
Things have really gotten out of hand.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Delusional.
Tour.
Deluded.
Sushi.
You don't have a clue as to what's going on. Live YouTube.
Sam has like the weight of the world on his shoulders.
Poggers.
Sam doesn't want to do this show anymore.
Do it anymore.
It was so much easier when the Majority Report was just you. You were happy.
Let's change the subject.
Right.
Rangers and Knicks are doing great.
Now, shut up. You don't want people saying reckless things on your program.
That's
No.
one of the most difficult parts about this show.
This is a pro-killing podcast.
I'm thinking maybe it's time we bury the hatchet.
Left is best. Violet.
Tour.
Don't be foolish and don't fucking tweet at me and don't bitch. The way Emma has cucked all of these people, love it.
That's where my heart is, so I wrote my honors thesis about it.
Oh,
Sorry,
she
finance.
wrote an honest thesis. I guess I should hand the main mic to you now.
You are to the right of me on foreign policy.
We already fund Israel, dude. Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I don't have an answer to.
Incredible theme song.
Hi, Bumbler.
Emma Vigeland, absolutely one of my favorite people. Actually, not just in the game, like period.
We are back, folks, and I'm opening up the phone line, 646-257-3920. Meat and potatoes, I don't know about you, but as a working class American, I love listening to a journalist with a posh British accent telling me that my neighbors didn't vote for Kamala Harris because they're too stupid. Well, look, he talked about a bunch of factors. Mehdi is a champion, so you can have a disagreement with him a little bit on this, but I don't think he's coming from a wrong place. We're just all very angry and upset right now, and there is a bit of despair that he was able to win with this kind of campaign. So
Yeah.
we're all fighting on the same side here. I mean, there's just so much this is not the time where we should be throwing, and I'm not saying you're doing that, but people reacting and analyzing things in the wake of this awful result, the conclusions that people are coming to, it's probably all of them.
Yeah, like I'm not here to definitely flatter people who vote Republican, and nor did I like the first time. I genuinely think a lot of the like pro-abortion vote, I think, was bigger last time. This time, it's like, oh, we're just a support of the fascism, broadly speaking, because it was really on the table. Look, we're having a lot of focus on men without college degrees right now, and I think a lot of that is looking at, say, the internet environment and stuff like that, which I would point out is owned wholesale by a tech that was created with money that was made after the financial crisis, right? So, but that aside, I think we have an issue when we talk about uncollege educated men. We know what the problem is here, which is that we have put bankers increasingly between young people and educations. And that was done explicitly for this reason. John Schwartz has a piece in The Intercept that said, we are a Reaganite in the 80s saying we are in danger of producing a educated proletariat. And so they said, we need to start charging interest on this sort of stuff and not letting it wide open. So these public university systems in California and New York gut those. And so maybe we can do this through, democratic partisan propaganda initiatives. Maybe if we give streamers more money. But I would say fundamentally there is a material structural problem here that is going to go beyond just trying to moralize about it. This is a structurally created.
Well, we tried moralizing the first time.
It doesn't work.
So
we have to do something about, say, college education, and I would say also high school education, and strengthening those things. We know the material ways to do this. You have to cultivate this at the soil level. You can't once roots are sprouting. It's like, okay, maybe look. I would love to be the person who is able to take men away from Tim Pool. I just don't think it's going to be a heroic individual. I think this stuff is not determined by the capacities of, say, Charlie Kirk or whatever. I think they are winning because of a game that's been stacked in their favor over the course of decades.
Yeah. Edel writes in, at the risk of being accused of mansplaining, I think Emma's making a bigger deal out of the misogyny angle. If Nina Turner had been at the top of the ticket, Democrats would have easily won. Why do you care so much about an empty pantsuit woman with all the trappings of toxic macho man did not win the presidency?
I wish that was true about Nina Turner. She lost to an APAC plant. So
there's, I'm sorry, you are mansplaining a little. You're coming from the right place. If Nina Turner had been at the top of the ticket, I think this is extremely aspirational thinking. She was taken apart in that primary race. On the national level, like there's a reason that progressive women of color are in our Congress is because they're in many ways right now in this country, deep blue districts, where it's safer for them. But is there one woman of color that is a governor in an executive position in this country? Is there one? I don't know. I mean, not that I can think of off the top of my head. And if that were to be the case, you would see the kind of campaign that Kamala Harris ran, which would be standard Democrat, centrist Democrat. If you talk to women and their reaction to this race, if they're not somebody that supported Donald Trump, they instinctively feel like this was a misogynistic result. And that's a big part of it. It's not the main part of it, but it's a big part of it.
I think,
and they ran, and I'm sorry, but you're ignoring the way that there's one theme from that campaign, or two: immigration and fear-mongering, and their bashing of women. On Monday, Trump was encouraging the audience to imagine Mike Tyson beating up Kamala Harris. What else? I mean, so... they ran a misogynistic campaign and she lost, and that's a part of it. It is. It just is.
I think it was part of it in 2016 as well. I think the issue is Rashid Tlaib won outpacing Harris by 39 points in Dearborn. This is Prem Tucker. 2 women, including a black woman running for Michigan State Supreme Court, won. I think it's true, but the problem is what first of all, who's going to emphasize that? It's going to be the consultant class. Like, what does it?
Well, I'm emphasizing it now. I'm emphasizing it now and saying it's mostly the material conditions, but 100% there was misogyny involved. There's misogyny involved in the fact that white men are allowed to identify with Donald Trump or, Bernie or Tim Walz on the left, for example, easily, and it's not considered something that's going to sink the Democratic Party. But when women identify with Kamala Harris, they're the death of the party, and it's stupid and ridiculous. And that's been the reaction broadly, and it's honestly been from both sides. If we're going to build a broad tent, that includes liberal women and women of color who saw themselves in this campaign to a certain degree. So I don't think that this rhetoric is helpful. It's a lot of different factors. What do you mean?
Because I'm thinking about okay, if I'm Gretchen Whitmer, do I like this narrative? Because frankly, this is what Bernie got supposedly sexist for in the 2020 primary when he's allegedly said that a woman can't win the presidency. I fundamentally don't think that's true. I do think it is an issue and a drag. But I think Gretchen Whitmer, if she had no tie to Biden and somehow emerged from a primary, I think she could have won. And I think there are states
She's also not a black woman. She's a woman.
That's possibly true too. I mean, fundamentally, I think it's a problem if we take this as the lesson when this person ran, Kamala Harris. And the reason I fundamentally have a problem with seeing her as a victim right now because of how the campaign that she did run. The crypto stuff
was not about seeing her as a victim. It's about having intersectional and material analysis. And
class first is when I talk about intersectionality, she lost black people in I forget either Michigan or Wisconsin.
She lost black men, yeah.
Yeah, and her outreach was what? Crypto.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I don't think you can have to see someone binarily as a victim to acknowledge the role that an explicitly misogynistic, violently misogynistic campaign played in this race. It's different than 2016. Hillary Clinton had a lot of exploitable issues, and they didn't run the same campaign in 2016 that they ran in 2024. It was more about protectionist trade deals. It was more about the TPP. They ran a campaign. On Monday, he was fantasizing about Mike Tyson beating her up and was going on Joe Rogan. To say that has no impact is so alienating. I'm not saying you're saying that, but there are people that are saying that. It is so alienating for women who have to be a part of our coalition going forward. And we have to acknowledge that is valid. We have to acknowledge that this feels like this women go through life sometimes in workplaces and they're more prepared and they try harder and they do better and they succeed, and then they don't get rewarded, and the guy that just showed up and fucked around gets ahead. And that's just internalized misogyny, and that's exactly how Trump was able to skate to the presidency in many ways. And that's not to absolve the Democrats of all of their issues, but it is to say that this was a real gut check about how this country views women and their humanity and their rights. And so if we're gonna build something that is inclusive, we have to have black women in the South. We have to have women more broadly. And that includes acknowledging that,
I agree with acknowledging it. I'm just saying that there's a reason that it's going to be emphasized by people who don't want to change and want to blame the voters. And I think that's why people are resistant to it. And I don't think it's just the desire to want to downplay.
The people that are resistant to it are white men. That's what I see. The people that are resistant to this analysis are white men. And that should also be reflective. And people should have, I think, as I'm reflecting on damn, my assumptions about driving up numbers in suburbia or abortion being the issue that could drive this campaign, that was wrong. We should also be cognizant about being critical of those assumptions as well. So yeah, I don't want to shy away from that. And I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of women are feeling the same way right now. But Bonus Bowl says, can you imagine Judy Gold not tweeting about a Trump win? Genocide completely rots the mind. I don't know anything about Judy's tweets.
Think about Judy Gold.
Libertarian Swifty says, Matt, do you think a white man who ran the same campaign as Harris would have lost?
Yeah, because again, my point is that this is a broader problem with the Democratic Party, and not Kamala Harris herself. I don't think Kamala, like, I don't think really anything. I think if Joe Biden, I honestly, like, even Barack Obama, if he jumped in the race at this point, I think if people are looking at it's impossible to find rent, someplace to rent, like, I just don't think that. I think there's only one place in the world where a party has retained power, and that is Mexico. And I would encourage people to look at those politics.
And if Biden had been that kind of transformational leader that AMLO was, Kamala Harris would have been set up in a much better position. So it's not the first thing, right? But
Yeah.
it was extremely important they opened the campaign by saying she was a slut that had an affair with Willie Brown.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I agree with all that stuff. I think, like, and I don't want to downplay it. I just want to say, like, I don't think it is as in the forefront of people's minds on this campaign, because Trump said, I mean, I listened to the grab 'em by the pussy tape again that came out ahead of the election last time, when a bunch of Republicans started bailing, because that's one of the most egregious things I've ever heard in my life. It is pure, unadulterated, like, sort of rape culture caught on tape. And he won. And so, like, and he won white women both fucking times for that, right? And
yeah.
So, like, we have a beast here. We do, like, and I don't want to downplay that. And that's why I've been, talking about Hunter S. Thompson for some time. Like, there is a terminal fascist problem in this country, definitely. And I just feel like that's why we have to be clear about, like, what do we do to turn out that crap?
And you're right. If that is the only takeaway from this failed campaign, it will be a disastrous, massive disservice.
Because we have certain callers
that
are always like, we can't run a black person in X state, right? Like,
yeah, I think that's ridiculous. But I do think on a national level, the headwinds are really, really, really hard.
It's true that Obama needed to be the massively sort of personally disciplined person that he was because of his identity. I 100%.
And we were in a recession, and Bush was the most unpopular incumbent that we'd seen in quite some time. And he ran on hope and change.
And kind of anti-war stuff. And Romney has a car elevator.
Yes. I mean, second time around, he skated by there too. But the conditions were favorable for Obama in 2008, and he also had this, like, otherworldly charisma as well. But that's the other thing where Sam said this before too. I do think that sometimes our society, we have easier time understanding racism and less about the misogyny, because it's cross-racial, it's cross-class, even if class is the number one driver and above all in even intersectional analysis. I think it's just harder to spot. And so this is why this campaign was so disturbing to me, was because
Peter Thiel doesn't like women's suffrage, and it's his VP.
Right. Duber says, I think Kamala being a woman made people trust what she says less, and voters need to believe and trust what she says about how bad Trump is and how much better the economy will be under Democrats. Yeah, and we have a long ways to go, but I do think that there is a theory to the idea that women of color in particular have a really hard time in this country acting in a capacity as a politician where they have to show authority. And that's why she was doing the Cheney stuff, as misguided as it was, as wrong as it was. I'm sympathetic to the hand that is dealt to a woman who was selected by Biden in a very cynical manner and put into a situation where, I don't know. Who knows? But maybe I'm seeing too much of myself in Kamala Harris, but it's also, I think there's a lot of women that do that. And see their experience in this race too. Niall from Trinidad says, I agree, Emma. People of color feel the same way. You can get everything you are told to do to achieve and still not get the prize. It's a story as old as time. We just survived, period. Yeah. Time to make
and
friends.
you know, when I say like I think women can win, and if I'm Gretchen Whitmer, I'm not liking that. I do think there are states probably you can't that might maybe be open. I think most of them are probably close to Democrats anyway. I'd be interested to see what political scientists say about that. But I think like the states you need to win, like you know, Hillary almost won. So you know,
right.
I think we can do better than Hillary, for instance. I think we did, and actually Kamala outperformed Hillary. So, you know, we can if we give them an actual agenda and say instead of Mark Cuban's opportunity economy, I think they have a chance.
That's the point. I'm not being doomer about a woman.
I mean, you're right. We made a point before the show about what this does to validate the content of the campaign. That I do think voters weren't really tuned into this campaign. I mean, some of them didn't even know Biden wasn't even on the ticket, right? But now that Trump won like that, then we're going to have that validated, and that is a huge problem. That's why I don't like Republicans to win elections.
Yeah, and it's validated in the part of their fascist natalist movement. Misogyny is a part of it, keeping women in the home. Like J.D. Vance was talking about this. You know, so it's not just defending Kamala. It's also observing the Republican strategy for what it was, and it worked. And so that's the thing that I want us to also be conscious of when we're doing our autopsy. Sour Diesel, young conservative men Americans are bolstered by a Fox News hawk. Oh, young conservative men American are bolstered by a Fox News hawking household that tells them the only voices of reason, especially teachers, are libtards who deserve to die. Misogyny is like breathing to these people. Billy says the Democratic Party out fundraised, out organized, out celebrity endorsed the Republicans 3-1 and lost big. Introspection is difficult for narcissists, which is, I think most politicians are. I wish them luck. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing is it's not like individual politicians having massive changes of heart, unless I guess they're John Fetterman.
Right.
Although even who knows if that was really a change. We just need a new crop in. And 2016 inspired a lot of people. And I would even say that was a little bit neutered yet because Trump was treated as if some kind of grand aberration. He's not.
Yeah.
And so what we need is more continued this because I think I have a huge problem with, say, like AIPAC taking out Bowman and Bush. You know, I'm heartened by Andrabi saying, well, now we can run new candidates instead of protecting old ones. But fundamentally is what we need is people to be building up the political skills. And that's not like, you know, it's not media skills, it's political skills. Get involved in running campaigns. Because why does Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib have the staying power? It's because they're good politicians. It's not just because they have the best ideology. And that's the thing that we really, really need.
That was the inside-outside thing that also AOC was emphasizing. They're really good at that, too. Both Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan might be the most talented of the squad at that particular politics.
In terms of actually, like, if I was hiring like a chief of staff, it would be like Ilhan or something like that.
Me too.
Like how to navigate this.
She's the whip for the Progressive Caucus. Like, don't
She was in Minnesota too.
Underestimate her political acumen at your peril, folks. All right, let's take a call here.
Sorry, one final note, and I don't know if we switched over to the fun half yet, but Osborne basically ran as an independent. And he lost, but he basically got up to like incumbent levels of vote. And so I think that's why, like, and I've said this for a while, even like Kowalski running as a Republican, like, I think there's good people in even like North Dakota Democratic Party, particularly on like Native issues. I've seen some good work and LGBT stuff, but that label is really toxic some places. And if you have like union experience, if anybody's listening, like you've led strikes, go out and get people on your side. And you might be able to run as an independent. And like if that happens, if we can get a few people in there like that want to play the Senate game, like Manchin does, but for the PRO Act, like that is one. If there's a quick sort of way to try to change things in what I expect to be a long fight, I think that's one way.
Well, in 2026, I believe Nebraska's other Senate seat is up. If I'm not mistaken, Bradley, Oh yeah, Pete Ricketts. So he's going to be running. He was appointed.
Kowalski's not positive about that. Ricketts,
Oh,
very
really?
big money family. Ricketts, I think the Cubs, I believe.
They own the Chicago Cubs, the Ricketts family.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that I know that last name. Yeah.
They probably got that locked down. But,
well, we'll see. I mean, like 2026, if things
on
go the way that we think they're going to go with this Trump administration, it could be a more favorable environment.
Yep.
I'm not giving up on Dan Osborne. I thought that campaign was extremely impressive.
Love Osborne.
Yep. Calling from a 239 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This me?
This is you.
Yes. First time caller and a long time listener. I just wanted to. I'm from Southwest Florida. My name is Jack.
Jack from Southwest Florida.
I just wanted to. Yeah. Yep. I just wanted to add some of my life experience and perspective, I guess, because I'm not from a blue state. I'm from Florida. We have been blue a couple times in my life, but I was born and raised here, and I haven't really lived anywhere else. But in my experience, it seems like Trump's win came from this belief and just love for money.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily.
He's the most American president ever. He's capitalism and cheating and
his name
gluttony
is literally Trump
personified.
Trump is literally in the dictionary for big boppers making deals and stuff like that.
There was a Mac Miller song called Donald Trump about him getting rich.
And I've seen a compilation of him mentioned in rap songs from the 90s, and it is you can make an hour-long cut.
Yeah, exactly.
It's as standing for rich guy.
Yeah. So, I mean, and so I don't know exactly how we strategize and appeal to a majority where that is sort of the core and the crux of where they make decisions from. But I can say that some of the things and the ways that we have had progress in the South, especially, I'm sure has been a lot harder to roll out, protections for minorities. It's just difficult sometimes enforcing that or finding the help and resources to utilize that. So I'm married to a woman of color, and I've witnessed her dealing with prejudice at her job, and it's heartbreaking. I mean, in the resources that we have federally installed didn't really make it down here. So even though they, there's ways that you can sort of somebody who knows somebody who knows a lawyer who can enforce this and get your case going through. It's just, there was never any sort of actual outreach to the general civilians of hey, are you experiencing prejudice at your job? This is the resources on how to make sure that your ideas are getting heard and not being ignored just because of people aren't taking you seriously and they're running on pompous, just insults of just oh, who does she know? It's just, it is scary. And I honestly thought that he was going to lose. It was a shocker. Probably a lot of people, I woke up in the middle of the night because I fell asleep and woke up and found out the bad news. And it physically hurt me. But my wife, luckily she had the day off on Wednesday. But it was just a very somber time in the house. And I think since you're allowing me just the opportunity, I just want to share with everyone to just make sure you're having the time that you turn everything off and you're sitting in nature and you're breathing everything in and you get to that center within yourself where all of these great ideas are coming from, because the solutions are there and we know them. And we're going to get lost if we get hung up in the fake arguments that they're creating. And we got to remember what it's really about, humanity and what has gotten us this far. So thanks for taking my call, and I really appreciate everything you guys are doing.
Thanks
And,
so much.
I will call again. I keep listening.
You know, you're reminding me to do deep breathing, which I never do. So I'm going to go and try to maybe take a walk in the park this weekend and turn my phone off. How about that? I'll take your advice, Jack.
Awesome.
Thanks so
guys.
much. Let's take another call here. Calling from a 480 area code. Who's this? Where you calling from?
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, hey. Long time listener, first time caller. My name is Alex. I'm from Chicago, but I've lived in Phoenix for the last 13 years.
Well,
So I just
congrats.
wanna-
You live in the state that went reddest of the 7 swing states.
Yeah, well, I did my part. I voted Kamala and blue all the way down, and I'm just glad the abortion measure passed.
Yeah.
And that we probably won't be getting Kerry Lake for the next 6 years. But I mainly wanted to call because I kind of wanted to just like discuss a little bit of my thoughts and, you know, understand where you guys are at of where we go from here, because I'm already past the doom and gloom, like it's over, like I thought it was on election night. I really think that we can't let ourselves just collapse and just submit to whatever we're going to have to go through for the next 4 years, because he can't run again in 4 years. And I think that's a big thing, because for the last 3 cycles, it's been the same nominee on the Republican side, Donald Trump. And I think that, you know, there's a good chance it's going to be J.D. Vance. You know, he's the vice president. But I think that there's a big opportunity if we really, you know, lock in and organize and try and get back the coalition that we had in the 2016 to 2020 Bernie movement, which I was a part of. I really think that we have a chance to not only just win back the presidency, but even possibly the Senate. And if we give up now and just try and like ignore politics for the next 4 years, we're not gonna have the advantage of organizing from day one, of what we need to do to, you know, not just lose this war, because, you know, this is a battle, not the whole war. Like, we lost, but we can still prevail in the end, because like, it's just, there's no option. You know, I'm 25 years old and I don't have a kid. I don't have a serious relationship. But I just think about, if I were to have a kid, by the time they're 75, all the projections they have about climate and what a 3 degrees Celsius warming means for the world, what kind of world are they going to be living in? You know?
I know.
I don't, they're saying that this is the first year on record that's going to pass the Paris Climate Accord threshold of 1.5 degree. I mean, we're in it. It's just a matter of how deep in this shit are we going to get? And the only option I see is to just continue to try and organize and fight. And we need to get back the energy, the power, the influence that we had from 2016 to 2020. I mean, it was unreal. I don't know if any of you can remember very much, but we really thought that Bernie Sanders had a chance of becoming the Democratic nominee.
I know.
And that, to me, is, in what they did to us, unforgivable. And they're paying the price for it. They paid the price for it 2 nights ago.
Well,
you know?
we all are, but yes, they are too. And yeah, I mean,
they might benefit from it like they did after 2016, but that's why
Right.
we need to organize,
Yes.
like actual, and get people actually organized. And that's why and Bernie was there. The thing is like, people look at Bernie in 2016, people need to look at Bernie's whole life. Like, winning municipal power on a municipal level, like becoming a good politician. People can criticize him for not having a job. It takes a lot to be in power for that long as a socialist, independent socialist in America. Might be some lessons there. And I would also point out Robin Wansley. I always say this, Minneapolis city council member, independent socialist. And I will even throw this out to Greens, because a Green Party person held that seat before her. Maybe I kind of loosened the lid a little bit. So if you want to win power and do it productively, I think we need to stop looking so much at presidential elections, because once we build muscles on a more local level and actually have something that we can point to, then I think we can influence those primaries a little bit more. Like it's pretty amazing that they were able to be influenced as much as they were. But again, Bernie was only able to influence it because he did all of that work, before. I mean, he approached the presidential campaign as an old guy because he'd been working.
Yep. Appreciate the call.
Yeah.
Real quick,
Well,
I want to just wrap up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say like a couple things. Like, I have a unique perspective on Trump voters. My uncle's a Trump voter. My coworker's a Trump voter, and they're two very different motivated Trump voters.
Yep.
The one I work with, he is a self-proclaimed Nazi. He's a racist. That's just what it is.
Nice.
I hear his. Yeah. It's pretty bad. But my uncle, he's he's not a racist. He's married to a Mexican woman. Like, he's got Mexican children, and for him it's the economy, and it's just stuff like that. But he drinks the Kool-Aid, and he listens to the Fox News bullshit. And but he still acknowledges that Bernie got screwed, and he's one of those people who acknowledges that Bernie wasn't one of the corrupt Democrats that we keep getting served every 4 years as a choice. And so I think that the people on the right, like, it's easier for them to see through that bullshit, and especially with all the podcasts and TikTok and how they get their news nowadays. But I really think that we need to focus on getting those disillusioned Trump voters, as well as the coalition that felt cast out, the uncommitted, the non-committed, not being a party that stands for genocide. And I think we'll have some gains to make in 4 years.
Appreciate the call. Thanks so much.
Of course. Have a good day.
You too. Emma Matt Bradley, A Square says, I skipped the show yesterday to try to decompress a bit. Can't thank you enough for the shows this week, including at the
Not
Bell
acceptable.
House.
People got to listen to all of these.
Exactly.
We need you now. That's what the country needs.
Come on, A Square. Don't you know that plunging yourself into a depression is an act of solidarity?
Bedrotting. Hey, John Lennon said it was, so.
Oh, well, he also, John Lennon, that was a childhood hero of mine that you learn a little bit more about when you get older, and you're like, that was pretty problematic.
I mean, try and having a favorite male writer, and then you find that biography, it's like, oh, he abused a woman.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Right. Wait, okay, here we go. I got some good, bad insights from the call set up by my bank for its regular and institutional clients on the election aftermath. Too long for an IM. We'll try to call today or Monday. Here's one piece of information in case I don't get through. Financial markets understand deportation executive orders are drafted and ready to be issued January 20th. As angry as people are at Latina men, we need to remember to be more angry and ruthless against the institution versus the people that will be impacted by this. Absolutely.
Good point. And, I'm very much in the point and fingers game. I got my point and fingers uniform on right now.
Sharpened your fingers.
Exactly. I do think what people are going to need, especially from people like us, but also local movements, is not just sort of delineating the failure of neoliberal Democrats over the last 20 years, which I think is very important and I think is going to be contested terrain, but also anticipating the threat that's going to come and the type of turmoil and how to best resist it. So, I think that's should be a shift of focus after we take some time off in the next couple of weeks.
Yep. Vinny P, California's 47th district is coming back down to its 616 vote difference with 716. I'm not sure what you mean by that math, but that is one of the races that is most closely being watched right now. Noah from Tampa said, anecdotally, but personally, it took me forever to really notice misogyny. It took me falling in love and listening to this story this woman told about how she wasn't listened to and how she'd been used and abused by men in her life. I didn't know how strong it is, and all of a sudden it was everywhere. Her stories remind me that my dad's misogyny was not disconnected from his abuse of my siblings and I. His constant chasing of women, his inability to see women as anything but caretakers and maids, meant that he never saw it his duty to take care of us. His abuse of my mother his infidelity, his forcing her to raise us alone, to his psychosis. Those who've read Öcalan are familiar with this, but misogyny is the ideology at the root of this hatred and materialism that thrives in the United States. Misogyny tells men not to love others, otherwise they're weak, and thus can't see others as people. I had a discussion with my sister after the election, and we had joked that it was basically like our dad became president. That's a very thoughtful comment, Noah from Tampa, and really, really sweet to hear from you. Yeah, honestly, it took me forever to kind of get to this place. Like, I went to an all-girls school, and they referred to us as scholar leaders, and they talked about sexism and misogyny all the time. And I reacted against it in a way because it was white feminism. So when you guys see me like railing against the Taylor Swiftification of feminism, it's kind of just personal because it's capitalistic, it's lean in, it's a feminism for women in boardrooms or white women who get to participate in society in a certain manner. But when you broaden it and you see it for what it is, you see how it intersects with, of course, things like racism and how present it is, and how the permission structure for a woman is much more narrow. And, or at least that's the conventional wisdom. And there's certain things you can and cannot say. And as a political candidate, or as someone even talking about politics, it can be a minefield, because also you have to say something in a way that's non-threatening, that doesn't turn people off. Why is Kamala's laugh and Hillary's laugh, why were those the two things that part of the right fixated on? It's like witchcraft. I mean, it's
and male anxiety.
And male anxiety. Why is she laughing?
I guess which is where witchcraft originally came from.
Right. And that's how rooted it is. Like, we're still basically calling Kamala a witch in 2024. And for us to really break this apart, we have to break that part of it open as well.
And Mehdi also mentioned the crime narrative thing, and of course we've done a lot on that topic for a while now, try to countering that propagandistic narrative. But the truth is that those represent two of the longest standing genres in literature, like 500 years old. Witch hunting. You look at all the obsession of like Cotton Mather and all those folks. Like, some of the first books that weren't the Bible were How to Spot Witches. Yep. And also fear of either like escaped slaves or crime sensationalism in like particularly the 19th century, that led to like the early formations of like police departments and stuff like that in the 1870s would brutally crush, say, labor uprisings and stuff like that. So this is a long fight.
DNC Google Pundit says, I 100% co-sign with Matt regarding the way forward. We need to get more left candidates to run as independents, particularly in key districts around the country. Drew from Illinois, people like Kyle Kalinske, Emma, Sam, Crystal, etc. need to go out and speak to the cringiest of cringe liberals.
It's been I don't know do we want to play this Grab 'em by the pussy tape? Because
sure.
Like, I just think it's been going viral on TikTok, and I do think there's a problem here. Like, the Me Too movement really pretty much was a result of Trump winning. But that movement didn't really change society, I think, in the way that anybody would be fully.
It was a white feminist movement.
Yeah, but the degree to which like this has been submerged, like the way he talks here is so fucking insane, and you realize that like just like I think a lot of his support is people who are like scammers and like doing like all sorts of like stuff. This is also a submerged part that doesn't get elaborated, and it's wild to hear that this was released, and a lot of Republicans freaked out briefly, and then he won the election. Donald Trump talking about a married woman he wants to have sex with.
Moved on her, and I failed. I'll admit it.
Whoa.
I did try and fuck her. She was married.
Huge news there.
No, Nancy. Yeah. No, this was marriages, and I moved on her very heavily. In fact, I took her out furniture shopping. She wanted to get some furniture. I said, I'll show you where they have some nice furniture. I took her out furniture. I moved on her like a bitch. but I couldn't get there. And she was married. And all of a sudden, I see her. She's now got the big phony tits and everything. She's totally changed her look. I gotta use some Tic Tacs just in case I start kissing her. You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet.
Yep.
And what's always struck me about that is like I'm not so surprised. There's a old slave master from Virginia, Bird, who has his diaries published, and he's like, yeah, I assaulted the maid at the hotel in Williamsburg, Virginia, because I was a little bit stressed out, and you get to do that to them. It's also the Billy Bush laughter, and the way he's participating in it, because that is like that is a submerged part of what we have to deal with. And I do think it does, warrant a lot of elaboration, because that's like rape culture. There's a certain, like, that type of guy is how Trump raised his numbers among a certain type of man, appealing to that 100%.
Yep. The Amazing Grando said, this may be a long IM, but I hope you see this, even if you don't read it on air. This might go down as one of the roughest weeks in MR history. Sam's mother passes away and has to try and be on camera while processing that grief. Then the election happens, and Emma has to try and make sense of all this largely solo with the assist from Matt and others, when a natural reaction would be to crawl into a hole for a week and grieve as well. Please get some rest this weekend, gang. You're carrying a lot on your shoulders, and we need your voice for the struggles ahead. Love you all. Appreciate that. It's very
thanks.
kind, and yes, we're thinking of Sam, of course. Johnny Blaze says, why are you all so spineless to blame the neoliberalism? Say it's my ball now. You are on the bench. I don't know what that means. DSA Bakar.
The thing is you can't just say it's my ball now. You have to actually win office and power, and then it becomes like there's a reason Rashida Tlaib is probably the biggest voice in this country against the genocide, and for all not sufficient, but it's just true that I would say, relative to, say, Jill Stein, Rashida Tlaib having one power in the House, her voice is much more relevant.
Edward Gregorian says, well, I think it's fair to say I got what I wanted, but now that it happened, it feels kind of bleak and not very fun. I'm excited to hear you guys talk about Sim and Tam's interview next week, which should lighten everyone's spirits. I did notice Sam calling me Gerard Depardieu multiple times. Is he not like my money or something? Can't think of a quicker way for these checks to dry up than for him to call me the name of a damn Frenchman. All right, we'll correct that, Edward. But I think he was trying to give you some cover.
That's Sam's situationist stuff.
Yeah. Robin in Crazy Arizona says, how did this awesome 25-year-old get onto the left, and how do we get to their peers?
Okay.
Yeah, well. Billy, what do you all think about the idea that Biden 2020's win was an aberration? And I think the next administrations might be one terms back and forth between parties. I don't know.
Well, the thing is like the aberration, but it's like an aberration against an aberration, because Trump himself is an aberration. I don't think a standard Republican can turn out the way Trump does. But also there was a pandemic, so like aberrations and aberrations. My hopeful thought, my morbid one, is that the Republicans are just going to have a string of victory like they did when Reagan got into power. My hopeful one is that while the Democrats look to have a terminal case, the Republicans do as well, and they're just not going to be able to be as honest about it. And fundamentally, they don't have a base appealable that's as wide as the Democrats is, if you do it the right way.
If you do it the right way.
And so, like, I do think there is a possibility to make something good out of this moment.
And majority enthusiast, anecdotal, I know, but Florida caller is right. Every person I know who openly celebrated the election cited gas prices and stimulus checks. I think that they think he's going to give them all more money for some reason. It's definitely all about money. Well, it's about the economy, right? And that's part of it. Or
it's so crazy that, I mean, the deportation, his thing for the working class was, we're going to deport a bunch of brown people.
Yep. Incubator, I agree with Matt as far as class first analysis, but the Harris loss absolutely does fit with a larger pattern of systemic misogyny. A white guy with her same platform probably would have also lost, but I think part of why Harris ran such a risk-averse campaign was because she was a woman of color. Incubator, thank you. That's a very good summary of my thoughts about it. It exacerbated the issues that we're critical of. Bitchy Torres says, kind of sucks to hear many rub Latinos' nose in it based on a decision of a 46% minority. I don't think someone can be demographically finger pointing while also blaming the Democratic Party for driving wedges between oppressed people. Love you guys, and Mehdi left his best. Yeah, I mean, look, I think he's also just, we're all just trying to make sense of it. But yeah.
Honestly, it's a kind of a shock that Republicans have done so poorly with newly immigrated peoples, because it takes a certain type of person to do that, or at least forms a certain type of person to do that. I just think you see a lot of like professional class sort of things that would appeal to or would cohere to a Republican way of looking at the world, if not for Republicans being so goddamn racist.
Right.
And so in a way, I'm like not kind of shocked to see some of that, because yeah, there are people who migrate from say African or black countries that look at black people in America, like down their nose at black people in America. This is a fairly obvious, fairly common dynamic.
Yeah. Simon says misogyny as a factor in Harris's loss isn't as impactful as the feeling women have to reckon with when it comes to how their fellow citizens see them. It matters so much more than what when the Trump campaign was running on open sexism. Yep.
And what the future means. I mean, it's like I am sensitive to the fact that it's not going to be my doctor's checkups that are under any kind of pressure.
Misogyny and subjugation of women is often a tenet of fascism as well. We'll get to some clips in a second. JD Vance says, couch cushions. I don't think men appreciate how much violence we've faced in the past 2 days as women. I've been threatened with sexual assault multiple times online. Your body, my choice is trending. Misogyny may not be the sole reason Kamala lost, but it's a huge part of Trumpism, and we are scared. Yes.
And that's something like programmatically, like I've not wanted to say show some of that stuff, but videos being made by like sort of right-wing edgelords about that stuff. This is a cultural. It feels like the Unite the Right rally or something like that. Like they them feeling themselves is such maybe the grossest thing that this country can do to people.
Yep. All right. Let's do a clip here. Oh, Barry Weiss. I almost forgot about this. So we were just talking a little bit about the role of racism and misogyny in the race. Primarily, this is an indictment of the Biden administration and their unpopularity. But this was, of course, a major factor in this race, and I think a big reason why Harris's campaign was conservative and risk averse, in part because of her gender. And so what's fascinating to see, though, is that even though she refused to emphasize her gender in the way like Hillary did, "I'm with her" was Hillary Clinton's campaign slogan in 2016. Even though she, when asked about racial divides, would say, "I want to be a president for all Americans," extremely in a very just disciplined way. It was quite clear that she was not going to take the bait on this front. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This is what Barry Weiss says Kamala Harris ran on. And I just want to be clear, it's 100% all a lie.
I know, but I'm old school. Question to you.
Yes.
You mentioned like liberal media outlets, et cetera. If you listen to them today, they're asking this question as to whether or not the progressive movement is dead. And the reason they're asking that question is, can the Democratic Party win on this progressive policies yet again? Now, what is your view on that, as whether or not you need to step into it, lean into it, or run like hell?
Of course, Democrats can win. They can win by embracing actual progressive policies. In other words, policies that advance the interests, especially the economic interests of working class Americans. That's what the Democratic Party was always about. Right. Why is Trump winning? He's stolen a lot of the ideas of, frankly, the old school Democratic Party. He ran on things that, 30 years ago would have been considered mainstream Democratic ideas. The idea of a strong border, the idea of, the idea of elevating the working class, the idea of tackling inflation, the idea of, more isolationist policies. Like, these were not traditional Republican policies. So how can progressives win again? By looking at what went wrong here, by taking this moment and allowing it not to be a retrenchment of the idea of, half of Americans want a fascist regime. They don't. They want a good life for themselves and their families, and actually looking in the mirror. It turns out that running on these extraordinarily niche issues like gender fluidity or defunding the police or any number of things that people in places where I live get extremely excited about don't actually matter or frankly feel profoundly out of touch to ordinary Americans. So if progressive is about these niche issues that you find on college campuses and in gender studies department, and you want to keep doubling down on that, you're going to continue to lose.
I feel like
Okay, so she begins by pretending like she's making a systemic critique of the Democrats, borrowing from real criticisms about eroding working class support. Things that may sound like, okay, yeah, the Democrats should not just be, there's an education gap in the base right now, and a lot of erosion has happened, et cetera. But it's all undercut by the complete straw man that her entire premise is operating on top of, which is the idea that Kamala Harris ran on defund the police. They're going to say this regardless because she's a black woman. They're going to say it regardless. And that's what's just so angering. She ran as a cop. She said, I have a Glock. She said, I prosecuted over and over again transnational criminal organizations dealing in guns, drugs, and human beings. I can memorize it. That's how many times she said it. She was studious in not emphasizing her gender or her race. And for Barry Weiss, she must have had this conclusion already drawn up before any of this, because it doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, it's from AIPAC.
It's validation for her politics, and then she can, say, oh, I'm a red dot in the blue sea of all these pink-haired liberals who are on board with her gender fluid platform. Kamala Harris was asked about trans youth and gave such a non-answer to avoid this very narrative, and it doesn't matter because they run with it anyway.
But they have to, because they're actually the culprits.
Yeah.
Barry Weiss and liberal Zionists are the reason. Look, I like to go back to, say, bank policy after the Great Financial Crisis. But it did not help that Joe Biden was conducting a genocide to keep people like Barry Weiss happy. Barry Weiss owes her prominence in media for one reason. It's because her support of Israel. Now, if we're actually looking into why people lose and how people might win, well, a Jewish woman just won in Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum. Barry Weiss has not mentioned her once because Barry Weiss does not care about Jewish people. Barry Weiss cares about Zionism. But Claudia Sheinbaum won in Mexico. Here's a little excerpt. From a roadside stand in his muggy stretch of southern Mexico where Carmelo Morgueles sells coconuts for a living, the 45-year-old father of three says he can see his country changing for the better. There's his pay, which has doubled from $5 to $10 thanks to a series of minimum wage hikes. And there are the hefty welfare payments that his elderly father and student daughter now receive from the government. Then there's the highway itself, repaved amid a boom of fresh investment across the impoverished South. For all of this good fortune, Morgueles credits one man, President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. He's a visionary, said Morgueles, who cheered on the president recently. But Lopez Obrador has vastly expanded the nation's welfare system, giving cash transfers to 10 million older Mexicans, along with millions of students, young workers, and people with disabilities. Now, Barry Weiss, if she was sincere about this, if she was sincere about, delivering for working class people, she would mention that instead of hemming and hawing about what Trump says he's gestures towards inflation or whatever. She doesn't care about that. She's trying to kneecap the left because that's what AIPAC and Zionists did, because the two representatives in the Democrats that may have understood what's going on with working people in this country, Jamal Bowman and Cory Bush, were taken out by people that got a large amount of AIPAC money. So guess what? Like it's no surprise that Fox News would have Barry Weiss on to talk about this. Do not get distracted or confused that she's kind of speaking like a worker, because Batya Ungar Sargon is another person who does this, who is just a Zionist, whose dad is responsible for opioid crimes in Massachusetts. But they're doing this like Dems don't care about the workers. Their priority is Israel. Yeah, and I mean, it's just so disingenuous.
she knows that that she didn't run on defund the police. No elected Democrat has said defund the police. It's been beaten out of them since what, 2021? I mean, that's the last time that was the case. She's had this already written out.
Latinx.
Yeah.
I'm standing in the middle of a genocide saying, hey, it's because of Latinx.
Right. And it's just like, what, they can't sell how Donald Trump won this race because he barely ran on anything whatsoever. They can't give a positive vision for Donald Trump's vision for America because his victory the second time around was much more hollow than the first one. And it's this hollowing out of our politics that, yes, Trump has contributed to, but the Democrats have also been a huge problem in this regard because they haven't created a robust opposition to make it so, like, Trump's complete alienation of people from politics hasn't resulted in, like, okay, I'm going to go with the rich guy who might send me a check.
And if you want to know which Democrats specifically, I would say the ones taking Zionist money. Tom Suozzi says Democrats have to stop pandering to the far left. He adds, I don't want to discriminate against anybody, but I don't think biological boys should be playing with girls. Well, here's an article from The Intercept, February 9, 2024. Pro-Israel Democrat majority for Israel backs centrist Democrat who progressive fear will side with the GOP. Look at that. DMFI, a staunch ally of right-wing AIPAC, is the only the latest centrist group to throw support behind conservative Democrat Tom Suozzi. These people are pointing the finger because they need they know the finger should be pointed at them. They are the thing that undermined this election, the support for Israel. They're being plants. They're why we don't have a connection to the working class, because you know what they need a connection to is Israel money.
Yep. I mean, like the Cori Bush was the most representative working class member of Congress. She was homeless at one point. She slept in her car. She was an activist as a part of the police brutality protests, and a money cannon was pointed at her that had AIPAC's name on the side of it.
And she was called a terrorist sympathizer by media.
So, we can't, I don't know if we can make direct full electoral, like, it's difficult for us to assess 3 days out, but we know that is overall a systemic problem in the party. And it has nothing to do with what Donald Trump offered or what even, like, the messaging of the national campaign was. It's just the structural issues at play here.
It's Westchester dictating to Mount Vernon. And that's the problem with the Democratic Party everywhere.
Yep. Old Chomsky, leave it to someone like Barry Weiss, who literally didn't know the definition of the word toady, to be such a stooge on national TV time and time again. When did she not know the definition of toady? That's pretty funny. Well, she did. Was it Edward Said who she tried to get fired, or was it?
It was a Columbia professor. I don't know if it was specifically Said, but she's a nasty little a freak and deserves absolutely no respect. And anybody who gives her cover as some sort of anything other than a Hasbara, which people look that up, that's Israeli propaganda, the art of explaining in Hebrew. That's all she is. That's the only reason she's ever been in media, and she's going to continue her prominence in media by a media that is Zionist, because it's a Zionist project.
Let's one of the underdiscussed elements of Trump's victory is, I mean, look, we have a drought warning here in New York City because there was basically no rain in October. It's been in the 70s over the past few days, in many days leading up to the election.
It was 80 on Halloween.
Climate change is making its effects felt, and Donald Trump is already emphasizing how he wants to drill and make sure that we pump as much oil as possible, and wants to essentially cancel many of our green transition priorities. And so here is Brazilian President Lula da Silva being asked about this on Christiane Amanpour's show on CNN. And this is what he had to say, and his plea for Donald Trump once he assumes the presidency again in January.
You know what President Trump did in his first term. He pulled the United States out of the landmark Paris Climate Accord. Do you think he's going to do the same thing again?
Well, I believe that President Trump, he has to think as an inhabitant of the planet Earth. And if he thinks as the ruler of the most important, richest country in the world, most important, that has the more technology, and that is better prepared from the arms viewpoint, he has to have the notion that the U.S. is in the same planet that I am, and that in an island of 300,000 inhabitants is. And so all of us, we have to take responsibility for the maintenance of this planet, of the Earth. We need to guarantee that the planet should not suffer a warming of more above than 1.6 degrees. We need to guarantee that the rivers should continue healthy with clean waters. And so we need to guarantee that the biomes of all the countries should be preserved. And so this is a commitment that I have, not only as the president of Brazil, as a human being that lives in the planet called Earth, and that there's no other place to live, only Earth.
Some interesting audio choices by CNN there, but it's appealing to Donald Trump's humanity is not going to work, but I appreciate the recentering of the climate here.
World leaders have a tough job, and AMLO navigated interestingly the first time around when Trump was president. Like, how do you deal with it when a crazy guy is the world leader? And honestly, to give Biden credit, one of the better things Biden did was, or Biden's State Department, was sending the letter saying, hey, Bolsonaro, don't steal that election. And that is one thing I would cite to say, like, hey, you do want a Democrat over a Republican in that sort of office, but, you know.
But it is going to be important that leaders like Lula hold the line on our climate, because when Trump completely disengages from international cooperation on climate change, the countries that are other economic powerhouses, and Brazil is one of the biggest countries in the world, are going to follow suit.
Has the Amazon, which is rather important.
Like China in particular, yes. China in particular will follow suit. India, Narendra Modi loves Trump. So, yeah, I mean, that is going to be immensely important. And our Latin American brothers and sisters, with some of the leftists that they've elected down there, climate, we've been talking a lot about Claudia Sheinbaum. She is a climate scientist. Thank God for them, because the rest of us are sliding into a fascist death spiral. And
I mean, where we're at is,
I don't envy Lula having to talk to Trump about climate change. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, I mean, climate is an issue where it's like, you know, we've wanted to try to mitigate or reverse it. The reframe needs to be now, it has been a crime committed against all of humanity by powerful people, and everybody deserves reparation from it. And I think that reparation should be in the form of, say, Green New Deal, healthcare concerns like housing, say if your house gets swept away in a giant flood, maybe a climate corps of people that are able to respond directly to things like that. Like, we need to start thinking collectively about what we do want. Because one of my problems with maybe Trump era the first time is we got really good at saying no, what we don't want. No more funding for cops. No more ICE. And I appreciate that energy, and I think it was necessary. But I think ultimately we do need to put forward a positive agenda. And you should say, like, we want process immigrants. We want a whole bunch of social services to care for people, so that cops aren't called for, right? Like, anyway, I'm rambling, but that's what we need, I think, going forward.
We need a lot of things. Bullprog says, I'm a non-binary person with a lot of trans friends in a fight for black liberation, and I hear about these niche issues so much more from right-wingers and grifters like Weiss.
That's why, I mean, but they have to point at something, like because we all know what the big glaring issue is here, and it's hard to run on, say, politics of joy and we're the better people when Joe Biden is giving missiles to destroy kids. And so, of course, they're going to say it's Latinx, or it's this. They need to put, if you're caught red-handed, you're going to try to like if you killed your roommate, you're going to blame their ex or something. I don't know.
Plausibly deniable, Kowalski says, I really hope RFK decides to go after Big Sugar when he does his big war on unhealthy things, just because I know Big Sugar will tell him what happened to his dad and uncle. Charlie Sheeher says, my plan... it's like, that was a extended release for Matt. Charlie Sheeher says, my plan now is to try to save up money for my next job to try and help flee red states. Everyone who can should and try to look for ways to help targets of this next administration any way they can. If they don't, what to do right now? We only have each other right now, and the only way out is through. On a side note, I'm hearing that the right wants to divert the Columbian River out of the deep eastern Washington to water Southern California, I believe. That sounds very disastrous.
You know, speaking of sugar, I mean, not to put any too much meaning on it, but Nixon was in Dallas the day before Kennedy died on behalf of PepsiCo.
DJ from Cincinnati, local silver linens keep on fighting. Hamilton County, Ohio. Cincinnati elected our first Dem prosecutor in 92 years, and she plans to open an ethics department, which I guess we didn't have. Also reelected our lesbian sheriff who ran against her boss who was unjustly fired her in 2020. All right. Left is best. Love y'all. Appreciate that. Kicking out the losers. Let's see what we have here on the phone lines. Calling from a 954 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Thomas from Richmond, Virginia.
Thomas from Richmond. What's on your mind?
So I'm one of the co-chairs of my DSA chapter here, and we won a city council seat last Tuesday in the election.
All right.
Good news.
Yeah. We worked with some other left-leaning groups in the city. It had been kind of like, I guess if I was being honest, like a year ago, our chapter was kind of like at the point of faltering. So were many other leftist groups in the city, because I think it was pretty difficult in the way that the Democratic Party had kind of sidelined the progressive movement, and COVID kind of like disrupted the normal practices of in-person organizing. It was quite difficult to move on after that and get our feet back under us. And yeah, I mean, like literally a year ago, we were meeting to discuss whether or not we were going to dissolve the chapter. And we reached out to our national organizer with DSA and got some training on stuff to do, and basically reached out to some local Palestinian solidarity groups, and over like Thanksgiving and the Christmas holidays kind of like planned to launch a Palestine solidarity campaign in Richmond. And over the course of this year, we basically built off of the Palestine solidarity work to expand into like all the normal avenues you would think of a DSA chapter doing stuff with, like labor solidarity and eco-socialism organizing and housing justice organizing, and kind of like tapping into that network. And we consolidated all of that in a council seat.
That's really, really good news, especially because you guys had such a turnaround.
Yeah, and you know, I think probably that for me, I think the biggest thing that I'm taking away from it right now is we're still in the capital of the Confederacy. Like, we're getting absolutely nowhere with our city council on like even performative, like non-binding resolutions condemning the genocide in Israel. And we often can't even get the city councilors to like talk to us, despite the fact that we have like hundreds of people coming to city council. And so, you know, I think this was kind of like a shot across the bow. Like, hey, guess what? We took one council seat. There's, you know, she's one of 9 candidates or 9 councilors. So it's not like, it's not going to dramatically change the political landscape in the city. Although a lot of our council operates sort of like by silent consensus. There's actually almost never any kind of debate in our council meetings. And one great thing about the person we elected is she's a loudmouth. So we'll see if that disrupts some of the kind of like decorum-based politics that we operate under in the South. So I think that's a big thing. Oh, and one other thing I want to add, we had like a celebration last night with our general membership to kind of like reconnect and re-strategize and stuff like that. And you know, we posted on socials because we figured like a lot of lapsed members would want to come, and new people might want to figure out a place to plug in for organizing work. And I think having like a recent victory to consolidate around is a great way to do that.
Yeah.
And we normally have like 20 people at these meetings, and last night we had like 85. So we were really stoked, and like having 4 times the number of people show up to your meeting all of a sudden is kind of insane. But yeah, we're hopeful that there might be some real possibility to kind of like consolidate on people's despair with the Democratic Party, and that's what everyone was sort of expressing last night. We kind of invited all the new people to talk.
I mean,
And
this is
it's
exactly what
pretty
happened in
unified.
2016, right? DSA exploded in growth after Trump's win.
Yeah, and I think it's going to happen again, but I think it's going to be more muted, because I think I'm kind of a crank, so I won't talk too much about it. I don't want to take too much of your time. I'm kind of one of the like stereotypical leftist cranks, but
No,
I really think
I think
focusing
you're
on
right.
national politics is
I feel it
pointless.
too.
Like,
yeah. We've got to build from the ground up in that way. And
yeah, I mean, the Senate will always be a death sentence for leftist movements, and like, there's no foreseeable future where we're going to take it. And so, like, it's important to get leftists in Congress to message and stuff like that. But
yep,
I can't get too upset about it, I guess. is what I'm saying.
No, I appreciate the call. Yeah, I mean, I think we have a lot of institutional rot, and the Democrats have been maintaining these institutions for quite a while. And there's going to have to be a reckoning or more robust change for us to be able to move forward, because the Senate is an extremely undemocratic institution, and it's actually less undemocratic than when it was at the start of our country, because we actually elect senators now, but they still found I mean, the filibuster is a way to beat back democracy. You need a 60 vote threshold for anything that isn't related to the budget.
I mean, people thought the Senate might die before LBJ basically got some shit through in like 50 years ago. Like, people were talking about like, yeah, well, we can't do anything.
Back when when our conversation, we could, wax poetically about the Senate going the way of the House of Lords and not just have to deal with the immediate aftermath of a fascist campaign winning the presidency. Those are the kinds of things that like the fact that Harris wanted to eliminate the filibuster for reproductive rights, it should be eliminated for everything. If we care about democracy, why do we need a 60 vote threshold to pass legislation in the Senate? And I know that people will say, well, the Republicans are about to take the Senate. Okay, but we don't, Walz actually said this in this campaign. You don't hoard political capital, you get power and then you burn it. Mr. Spiff Twitch said, just paid my first year's dues to join my local DSA. Thanks to you all, left is best. Appreciate that. Planturf says, I'm hot and sick of my and my fascism is flaring up again. I'm gonna need a couple days to recuperate. Okay. The time is now, says we need to build a ground game in red states and start flipping the state legislature, bodies and governments. Yes. Incubator says, this is a long one, but I read this quote and it seemed really appropriate for the time. Historians have a word for Germans who joined the Nazi Party, not because they hated Jews, but out of a hope for restored patriotism or a sense of economic anxiety or a hope to preserve their religious values or dislike of their opponents or raw political opportunism or convenience or ignorance or greed. That word is Nazi. Historians study their motives, but that there is a broad understanding. Their motives don't exonerate them. They joined what they joined. They lent their support and their moral approval, and in so doing, they bound themselves to everything that came after. Who cares anymore what particular knot they used in the binding? A.R. Moxon. I mean, there's validity there. It's interesting. Maybe I'll.
What about Americans who vote for like Joe Biden? Like, are they responsible for the genocide in Gaza? Like,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I don't like that thinking because it's used against like Palestinians too, or, Hamas. They support Hamas. But it is it is depressing. Yeah. I don't have all the answers
I have
right
nothing
now.
to say good about like the rank and file Nazi. I think the larger problem with National Socialism wasn't like that people voted for it, but that it was instituted by like sort of powerful people,
right?
In effort to kill the left.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's interesting because actually, I think one of the Vanguard guys sent me this quote from Hunter S. Thompson, who I guess you guys have been you've been reading a lot of him, Matt.
I've been deep into my Gonzo bag for the last couple months.
But it pairs well with that quote, and this is just as valid. I mean, we can be angry at our fellow Americans as long as we don't dismiss that we need to win them over.
About him.
Yeah,
but,
right.
They haven't changed a lot.
Yeah, but this quote about Nixon, winning re-election in 1972 when people thought that wouldn't be the case, from Hunter S. Thompson is really good. This may be the year when we finally come face to face with ourselves, finally just lay back and say it, that we are really just a nation of 220 million used car salesmen with all the money we need to buy guns and no qualms at all about killing anybody else in the world who tries to make us uncomfortable. The tragedy of all of this is that George McGovern, for all his mistakes, understands what a fantastic monument to all the best instincts of the human race this country might have been if we could have kept it out of the hands of greedy little hustlers like Richard Nixon. McGovern made some stupid mistakes, but in context they seem almost frivolous compared to the things Richard Nixon does every day of his life on purpose. Jesus, where will it end? How low do you have to stoop in this country to be president? Pretty apt about McGovern and Harris and Trump and Nixon.
Yeah, I mean, D.H. Lawrence has a quote: "The essential American soul is hard, isolate, stoic, and a killer. It has never yet melted."
All right, guys, we're gonna read some IMs and then we'll get out of here. I think it's time.
Also, Hunter S. Thompson's campaign for Aspen Sheriff is one of the more, ultimately not successful, so maybe not as inspiring as it could be, but one of the more inspiring looks at grassroots politics in this country.
Turning off the phones, reading some IMs. Q-Bean says, in relation to this convo, I want to share some light of this dark week. I want to shout out Wes Peltier in Portland, Maine, a Maine DSA former co-chair who just won my city council seat a few years ago. Maine DSA launched a Livable Portland campaign that led the groundwork to his election. These things take time, but there is a way forward. Sorry, Matt says Hunter S. Thompson abused his family too. Sad face. Yeah, well,
I know, man.
I mean,
It's tough.
John Lennon and that's who we're talking
George
about.
Orwell.
Well, right.
Norman Mailer.
I'm pretty sure George Orwell. I can't remember that, but I'm pretty sure there was something going on there too. David Bowie, I think, did some. I mean, I actually don't get into any glam rock era rock stars and maybe sort of age of consent style issues, but. By the way, we started with Karine Jean-Pierre. Do we want to do a Jen Psaki clip?
Do you want to do that, or do you want to just leave?
I kind of want to do the clip. 'cause
Okay,
she
wow.
agrees with us in an interesting way.
So Jen Psaki was probably the first of these MSNBC hosts I remember when I was screaming that Biden needed to drop out of the race. I was watching cable news to see if anyone would say the same thing. And on CNN, they were more critical, but on MSNBC, it took quite a while. They were sucking up to Biden the entire time. Jen Psaki was really the first to say, maybe we should consider this. And at the end of the day, Biden would have gotten trounced. He trounced. I thought Harris would win easily, but it ended up just being the worst case scenario, which was harm mitigation. So we didn't lose New Jersey, New Mexico, like Senate seats that we shouldn't have had to worry about.
I mean, it looks like the polls are basically right, and it very clearly showed that a bounce towards Harris after she left. After he left. And even on the economy, I think I said this earlier, but Harris closed like a 16-point gap in terms of economic numbers that Biden had created that hole, right? So I'm just these Biden diehards that say, no, it would have been
it would have been a great idea to keep the guy who couldn't communicate to stay in the race. He's the only guy that could have beat Trump. I have nothing but contempt for that stupid ass opinion. So anyway, credit to Jen Psaki for putting herself out there back in those days within a very narrow MSNBC permission structure. And now she has correct analysis about what the Democrats did wrong.
There is sexism, there's racism. All of that is true. But I also think there is a real question I hope people start looking at about who people are listening to. In my view, there was an over-listening to and an over-lifting up of people who left Trump, not people who left the Democratic Party. The people who left the Democratic Party are the people who are going to win in the future. The people who left Trump, the never-Trumpers who have important voices and that is not the winning coalition. And I think that is a takeaway. There is sexism, there's racism.
That is, first of all, we know that, but to say that to Joe Scarborough's goddamn head is crazy.
Well, because you know what they're going to say? They're like, yes, the voters that left, so we've got to run a Latino man. Because that's what they're going to say.
Trans people.
Right. Oh, yeah, right. Who was cracking, like maybe a Latino cop who cracks some, like they don't think about those things in systemic ways. The analysis that they'll get from that is like, how can we get these voters back by putting someone up who has the identity that makes sense for the voters that we bled? And that's not the right way to put it, but hopefully, maybe if that's what Jen Psaki is saying, there's more systemic critique at play here.
That's so. I mean, their entire last 4 years of programming.
Yeah. Gotta love this. I am cucked. Todd says, interesting to see that Matt wanted to play the clip and didn't want to just leave. Under Biden, no one wanted to work anymore, but now after a Trump win, it's time to get back to work.
Well, I know my tax is gonna become. We're gonna be able to take home more pay, so I guess I'm gonna stay here longer.
Yeah. Oh my God. I don't want to do this job anymore. Morpheus says, run Julian Castro. I can deal with that. Yes, definitely my third choice in that crowded primary. Bernie, then Warren, then Julian Castro. And then I would have put Kamala over Buttigieg or
the migrant thing
Gillibrand.
is so important to be able to affirmatively say, actually, we're not afraid of people migrating to this country, and it doesn't have to undercut workers. Like, it's necessary. And Walz kind of got there in the debate with J.D. Vance, where he's like, that's not why I don't know why I'm doing Jimmy Dore for Walz. That's not why the economy's not here because migrants are here, or bad because migrants are here.
Yeah.
But I even think Bernie could have been better on this through the past 8 years of messaging that, like, we should look at if your job hires more workers, it's only a problem if it's going to suppress your wages. But we know that it's not coming from other workers because capitalists are taking home more and more of the revenue and then blaming it on, I guess I got to hire all these lower workers. Like, Castro would be great, I guess is what I'm saying.
Woke Willie says progressive elected should hammer home the merits of their vision, but I hope they also begin to interrogate establishment Democrats' definition of moderate in mainstream spaces. I feel there's very little evidence showing it aligns with whatever the median voter sees as moderate, especially on economics. I think broader awareness of this would help disengaged voters feel more comfortable joining our coalition. I think that's a really good point.
I mean, they think Yoav Gallant is moderate.
Yeah. Militant apathy said, sad but true, Southern white people do not care about Gaza. Yeah.
A lot more than white people in the South.
Yep. Pre said, earlier caller reminded me that last time I felt this demoralized was after the Bernie dropout in 2020. It was Michael's videos on TMBS that got me through it. I'm on my phone, so it's hard to search the archives, but I'm going to rewatch that later this evening. That's a great idea. Killing in the Name of says, as a military veteran and soon to be retired lieutenant colonel, I need to renew my DSA membership and refresh my attendance. I've just been so tired with the constant electioneering. I hear you on that.
Yep.
Steve Austin says, thank you to all the thoughtful, positive callers that were allowed to participate today. Yes, thank you very much. And the final I am of this week. I'm gonna try to find another one here. Bobby Western. Do you know how grim it's gonna fucking be when they inaugurate Trump and Biden is sitting in the wheelchair with spittle on his lip? And Kamala's strapped with a Glock, all bearing witness, no congratulating the fascists on beating them at a game that they never understood the rules for. I will always spell America with a triple K. Fuck the charlatans. We need to build muscle and power from the ground up. There's no other option. It's either that or we're going to be facing the firing squad. Okay, Bobby Western, you will not be the final I am. I need a more positive vision, but it is... I'll add an extra wrinkle. Kamala's not just going to have to be there on Inauguration Day. She has to certify the election as the in the Mike Pence role.
I'm still hoping out that some of that Cheney outreach is because they're planning to steal it.
I know. That's what I said on the election. I was like, God, couldn't they have fucking rigged it? God damn it.
LBJ knew how to rig things.
Yeah. And the final I am of the day, week... Tic-tac-toe. Let's not start parsing out the good Nazis. What's the point? I'm one of the good ones. I only burned some of the books. Yep, I hear you. I hear you. All right, guys. Appreciate you all. We will see you on Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,